see the setup exactly what you're describing, making sure that the proper equipment's out there, the appropriate medications that we have discussed, you know, prior to the delivery of those medications. But the first question that I get usually when I go out there is about those medications. And although the nurse has already been out there and has done a lot of education and teaching, I think that family members sometimes are afraid to administer the medications. And I usually need to reassure them that there's nothing out there in doses that are going to be harmful in any way, that it's meant for symptomatic control and comfort.
Well, I remember that eyedropper with the morphine, you know, in cases of need, and it's like, oh no, it's like a fire alarm, you know.
The word morphine, I think, makes people very nervous.
Well,
so
it does, especially with a really elderly person. I mean, Doris was 92 when she passed, and she had a built-in reluctance to take medications.
Like medications, period.
Yeah, aspirins, you know. But there were also things that were very important. The hygiene issues. My goodness, when we finally had people there to bathe. You know, it's stuff that I, as a son-in-law, couldn't do, and yet made Doris feel better. Yes.
Well, I think it was Donna. I think was the aide that we sent out there, and I knew she would do a fantastic job.
Well, and in fact, she did, and I know hospice care is new to many people, and yet we've learned that it's been a feature of Torrance Memorial for 15 years.
Yes.
So that's pretty good, and it was, you know, for me personally, it was just a tremendous relief. Now, the Torrance Memorial Medical Center Hospice Program has provided us with a video that highlights their services. So let's take a look at a short excerpt from that video.
Today we're going to see Ray. We've had him as a patient now for, well, 3, I think going into 4 months. He gets tearful when things aren't going well, because he knows he's going to die, and he's trying to be brave about it. His caregiver keeps near to him, and so they support each other. Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
One of the rewarding aspects of hospice care for staff and volunteers is the privilege of knowing their patients and learning their stories. Ray loves to share the stories of his youth. He was a football hero in Kansas, where he grew up. He traveled the world while in the Army and later in the Diplomatic Corps. He was heavily involved in helping orphaned and underprivileged boys through the Battersea Boys Club while stationed in London just after the war.
I'm feeling good and breathing fairly decent.
At 82, Ray's long history of smoking finally caught up with him, and he developed severe emphysema with associated heart failure. In hospice, each patient needs a primary caregiver, usually a member of the family. As Ray's caregiver, Frances not only provides company and support, but also helps with practical matters, such as the oxygen supply. The hospice team is composed of nurses, social workers, nurses' aides, volunteers, and many more who dedicate their lives and careers to this special calling. Each week, the team meets to problem solve and work out individual plans for each patient.
Oxygen dependent, she also uses albuterol 4 or 5 times a day.
At these meetings, each patient's case is discussed in detail. Plans are made for various aspects of care, including physical, emotional, and spiritual support, ordering of any equipment that might be needed, arrangements for therapy, visits by volunteers or other caregivers, and medication management. Helping patients and families accept the reality that faces them is a key role of the hospice team.
You know, watching that, I was just thinking, of course, you guys, when you get back to the hospital, are busy talking about the cases in that aspect. But on the front lines, having help with what kind of meals can I prepare? Why isn't Doris taking enough water? Those were things that were so helpful to have you there, Maria, to tell us that, look, try this.
And that's the whole purpose of us being there, is to provide the education so that as things happen, it might not be so scary. You know a little bit about what to expect.
Well, it is scary. I know.
Yeah.
I was talking to Dr. Butler once. It only has to happen to you one time when you're not there, when there's a fall, for example. And just having someone, a professional, say, you know, maybe these runners that are on the
Those
floor,
rugs.
they just, maybe it's time for them to go. But there are a lot of practical things, whether it's a grabber to get something out of the pantry, or the grab rails in the bathroom. Who thinks about that stuff?
You don't.
No.
You really don't.
And the other thing was how many practical, mechanical things there are to help you. The special toilet seats.
Yes.
Because I had an inventory of things.
Baby monitors,
Yeah.
sometimes we recommend.
Right.
Just for observation. Yeah, we always come up, bed guards, bed alarms.
Right.
There's always things that we can kind of do to make the home safer.
Yeah.
for the
And you know,
patient.
even though Lisa, my wife, is a nurse, and but we needed help because this was such an awkward illness and
Yes.
so badly placed that we needed help in actually creating bandages for Doris.
And the family, you guys did a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you. Well,
I mean, it was a tough case.
yeah, it really was. But Doris, bless her heart, she toughed it out and got through it and was exactly where she wanted to be.
Yes, she was.
Well,
in
it's
her
true.
own bed.
That's right. Now, it's time for a short break. When we come back, we will continue our discussion of hospice care with these good folks from the Torrance Memorial Medical Center Hospice Program. We'll be right back.
The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power wants to give you up to 7 free shade trees just for completing a workshop, either online or in your neighborhood. The Trees for a Green LA program offers LADWP residents over 40 different varieties of free shade trees. Trees benefit the environment, save energy, and add beauty. Get your trees by participating in an online workshop by logging on to ladwp.com/trees or call 1-800-GREEN-LA.
As kids, it's really important that we learn the proper way to cross a street. First, you have to stop at the curve, then look both ways to make sure there are no cars. If you see one, wait for it to pass, and when it's clear, you can cross. As kids, sometimes you have to set an example. Look both ways before you cross. Cars can't see you.
Welcome back to Aging in LA. Our topic today, hospice care. And as I said at the beginning of the program, this is a very personal story for me, as my family and I recently experienced the full measure of what hospice care really means. Through the efforts of our guests from the Torrance Memorial Medical Center, who were so helpful at the hospice program, and again I say thank you. Let's talk about hospice care in the future. This is going to grow, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's going to grow. With the aging population, I think as people become more familiar and more comfortable with hospice care, I absolutely think that we will see much more of it in the future.
Well, there's always this sort of ostrich mentality. You put your head in the sand, and yet we all come to the end of life. And to understand that there are people who have dedicated their professional lives to dealing with these things, as you have, Maria.
It's another step in our journey. And what I've found almost universally is that people do not like to talk about death.
Absolutely.
You know, their own or anybody else's. That just doesn't happen to us, you know. We're not going to do that.
Which is a big misconception. I mean, you can have an accident at any time. It's
Surely.
so important to discuss advanced directives when you're young. No, don't wait until you're sick. Those are things that you should be talking about with your family members so that they know what it is that you want when that time comes, whenever that may be, and so they can
Exactly.
respect your wishes.
And to have a packet. You brought a packet for
Yes.
us to actually look at, you know, well, what are your orders here?
Absolutely.
Do you have do not resuscitate orders? What are we going to do if there's a crisis? And it was accessible. You know, I know there were times when the subject was so difficult, I would rely on that and say, here, you look at this. Tell me what you think is the next step. But you bring other tools to the equation. Most people would have no idea that there are different kind of therapies that can be employed to make a person more comfortable.
The occupational therapist can be very helpful, and our occupational therapist also does a life review and can facilitate doing a scrapbook or making a video memorial, or she does things like that.
You know, and that's a good thing, because there are many tasks left undone at the end of life. You know, a graduation that you won't be able to attend, and yet a video greeting is wonderful. I like those things.
Good services. Really, it's very much a team sport.
Well, I mean,
team effort.
It is a team.
Is.
I mean, and there are social workers, nurses, volunteers,
The aides,
the
physical
aides.
therapists.
And when we do have our weekly meetings, we're all there, and we get everybody's input. The spiritual services, we have a chaplain that's at all of our meetings as
and
well.
that can be critically important.
Absolutely.
Because there's so much fear involved. Now, when we first saw each other earlier today, I said that JC and I had talked about how we wish we had started the hospice program earlier, because it really did relieve that burden. And rather than having 2 months of the service, I would have loved to have had 4. I know my nights would have been much more comfortable and that. Now, what about those patients that really need sort of around-the-clock caregiving services, but there's no one in their family? Are there enough aides and volunteers to help cover those moments of isolation?
We can cover periods of time. That is probably the one thing we don't supply is a 24-hour caretaker, but we do have volunteers that will go out and spend hours, not as a caretaker, but they're good eyes and ears to have in the home. The nurses generally, they have a caseload, so you have your patients that you sort of manage with my supervision. And the nurses will go out 2 to 3 times a week, depending on what the needs are. And actually, when things get critical, we'll go out and do daily visits. We have patients in fact, just last week, we had a patient that was having a lot of difficulty with pain management in the home. So we did bring him into the hospital to get his pain under control. It allowed some time for his wife to get a little bit of a break. It's been rough for her, but it worked out completely successfully. He went home feeling much more comfortable, and now we have him on a regimen that's working much better for him in the home. So.
Well, it's always so difficult to balance mental awareness and yet the need to combat pain, because we all hate to see people we care about suffer. But boy, you don't want to sort of like knock them out either.
Right, you want to be spending time with them.
Well,
and
exactly.
having those conversations and having good quality, and that's being sedated is not the answer to that either. So you have to find that nice balance.
Well, the other part I liked is the number on the portfolio that was left with us. It's there, and just knowing that here's a number that you can call.
Which is a 24-hour number.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. You get through to the nurse. The nurses can reach me 24/7 as well. If we need to, we'll mobilize out to the home in the middle of the night. Absolutely.
Well, let's take another look at the video from the Torrance Memorial Medical Center Hospice Program. This time featuring home health aides and volunteers that assist in the program.
As part of the care plan, hospice can arrange for home health aides who can relieve the primary caregiver by helping with bathing and meal preparation. Another key member of the hospice team is the volunteer.
We have a lot of people that do on the hospice team. We have bath aides and nurses and social workers and stuff. The volunteers are really there to be. They're with the patient and the family. They're simply there to be there, to be with them. As I said, listening to their story, reminiscing about their life, listening to the music of their time, reading poetry to them. You know, and the volunteers come with open arms. They come not with a job, not with a task, just to be there for that family and that patient.
Now, the role of volunteers in AIDS, how wonderful that people, I mean, they're truly angelic in spirit to face this because they know what they're walking into.
And so many of our volunteers have experienced the loss. That's sometimes how they come into the program.
And you can understand that motivation. I know, there are so many times I look back and I think, I just missed by a little of knowing either when to say the right thing or do the right thing. And I think with someone I wasn't so close to, I would be better at it, you know, and that's a good motivation. Now, how do volunteers, if they feel a calling to do this, and it is a calling, I think, how do they get in contact with you? How do they get in contact with Torrance Memorial Hospice Program?
They can just call us, and certainly we would put them in touch with Ellen, our volunteer coordinator. We currently have 72 volunteers, which is great. They provide not only conversational visits and just spending time with patients, but they'll do hair cutting.
Right, and there's the number and the website on your screen, folks. I always tell our viewers to please have a piece of paper and pencil with you. I'm sorry, now you were saying that...
Please call us.
Yes.
We would love any volunteers, assistance, anything.
And volunteering can be most anything, driving or
if you're a patient and or a family member and you are interested in hospice services, please call us.
Right.
We do get a lot of referrals, just sort of self-referrals, probably more so than we do physician referrals. So again, we want to get people in our program early.
Well, and it's not like the program ends when the patient passes. I know I appreciate those follow-up calls that come in once a month. How are you doing, Paul? How's your wife doing? How's the family?
The bereavement program.
Because that's important. Now, unfortunately, our time is up for today's edition of Aging in L.A. Thanks so much to our guests from the Torrance Memorial Medical Center Hospice Program, who were such a comfort to my family. Thank you to Dr. Lisa Humphreys and Maria Sowers, RN, for joining us. And now, it's time for our feature on Aging in LA, Senior Stat Shots, where we look at statistics that pertain to senior citizens. We found today's statistics in the recently released LA County Seniors Count, a survey of the older adult population in Los Angeles City and County. We have featured this survey on our program. We find that some seniors encounter various amounts of difficulty in performing the following daily tasks. For example, 70% of seniors have no difficulty in getting in and out of bed, but 19% have a minor difficulty, 5% have serious difficulty, and about 2% are unable to do so. When it comes to preparing meals, 68% have no difficulty, 15% have a minor difficulty, 6% a serious difficulty, and 6% are unable to do so. Now, as far as eating meals is concerned, 82% report they do not find it difficult, 10% have a minor difficulty, 2% a serious difficulty, and 1% of seniors in LA County are unable to eat on their own. What about using the telephone? 79% do not find it difficult at all, 11% have a minor difficulty, 3% a serious difficulty, and 2% are unable to use a phone. In our next program, we will look at statistics that show who gives seniors assistance in these daily tasks if they need it. And that's today's Senior Stat Shot. Now, you can get your own copy of this fact-filled survey by simply going online to www.ladcss.org, which is Los Angeles County Community and Senior Services, and you just click on LA County Seniors Count, and the full report will appear. Or you can have a copy sent to you by calling area 213-738-2065. That's area code 213-738-2065. I'm Paul Peterson for the Los Angeles Department of Aging, the people here at CityView Channel 35, and all of our guests on Aging in LA. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Lisa, thank you so much for
biggest blessing in life is to realize your personal power.
So many of us wonder, why are we living? Well, that's why we're living, to help others.
Community work brings families closer together.
When we help each other, we all get healthier.
Doing good for others, doing positive action always comes back around and enriches your life. It's the biggest gift you could ever give yourself.
Doing good is good for all of us.
Please join us in volunteering.
Improve your health by helping others. Visit iparticipate.org.
Hi, I'm Nina. This is my daughter Miranda, and we live in Silver Lake. We love the cultural diversity of Los Angeles. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35. Our city, our channel.
Good morning, Los Angeles, and welcome to the City Council meeting for Wednesday, July 20th, 2011. We're here in the John Ferraro Council Chambers, room 340. We meet here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. I want to welcome members of the public who are with us today, especially our Government 101 class, students who are learning about the ins and outs of city government, as well as members of our city family and city employees who are here as part of the meeting today. Our agendas are available online at lacity.org and made available to the public as well at our city buildings 72 hours in advance for our regular agenda items and 24 hours in advance for any special agenda items. We have council members Cardenas, Huizar, Koretz, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, and Wesson all here. Thank you very much for your promptness. We have Mr. Zine excused today, so that leaves council members Alarcon, Englander, Krikorian, and Rosendahl. As soon as one of those four members is here, we will have a quorum and we can begin the meeting. In the meantime, if folks would like to be heard on any of the items that are before us or for our general public comment, please fill out speaker cards here or in Van Nuys and San Pedro and hand it to one of the sergeants at arms. We'll make sure to get your card in the mix. We have a podium here and a clock to help you guide your time. It's usually 2 minutes per speaker. We also have the ability to testify from Van Nuys and San Pedro if that's closer to where you live. We are broadcast live on Channel 35 as well as on the city's internet website at lacity.org, and also we are available through your telephone at council phone, which is 213-621-CITY, and you can listen into our council meetings as well as any of our committee meetings. So thank you again to those council members who are here. Mr. Cardenas?
Point of clarification, Mr. President. How many members of the City Council do we have at this time?
We have 14 current members out of a 15-member body because Ms. Hahn is now a congresswoman.
She officially got sworn into Congress yesterday, correct?
Absolutely. Okay. We congratulate her.
I do miss her already, sincerely, I mean that, but we do have her name on the queue here.
Yes, it's on the computer screen, but we're working with ITA to make sure that she's taken off, but nobody should expect if they see name on the vote.
I don't mind keeping her name on there, maybe with a little asterisk or something like in memory of. Or...
And she's certainly not pulling two salaries, so don't worry.
Yes, of
we
course.
are saving money on that front until our special election, hopefully later this year for the City Council district seat in District 15. And that will be our newest election for the city, for City Council sometime probably later this year. For those of you that are here as part of Government 101, the committee that I chair, which is Rules and Elections, will be considering what date to hold the primary election potentially, or we will be taking that directly here in the council today. Actually, I think it's on item. It's one of the items here. 18 is about what dates to set for the council election. Mr. Englander is here, and with that, that does constitute 10 members and a quorum. So, Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll so we can begin the meeting?
Alarcon, Cardenas, Englander, Huizar, Koretz, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay. First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
All right. Mr. Huizar moves and Mr. Koretz seconds. The minutes from the last meeting are approved without objection. Next order of business.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Wesson moves and Mr. Reyes seconds without objection. Those commendatory resolutions are also approved by the council. If we can run through today's agenda. Colleagues, if there are items that you wish to call special, now would be the time to call out any of the items that are special. Cards from the public on items that have not yet had hearings will also call items special automatically for a discussion later. First batch of items, please. And we are still awaiting council members Alarcon, Krikorian, and Rosendahl. We need 12 members for the ordinances that are here. Ordinances have a higher threshold vote, so we will hold those on the desk until we have 12 members. If Mr. Alarcon, Mr. Krikorian, and Mr. Rosendahl will please join us as soon as possible. But first items, please.
Mr. President, items 1 through 4 are items noticed for public hearing. The Department of Building and Safety recommends that item 4 be received and filed inasmuch as a settlement lien payment has been received.
Okay, we'll move to receive and file number 4. Mr. Cardenas?
Yes, I just was going to make that announcement on item number 4. I want to thank the department for working with that constituent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I know that constituent was here, and thank you, Mr. Cardenas, for addressing that constituent's concerns as well. Do we have any cards from the public on any of those items?
Sir, we do not. Item 1 is an ordinance, however.
Okay, we'll hold that. We did get Mr. Rosendahl here. We're still awaiting Mr. Alarcon and Mr. Krikorian. As soon as one of them is here, we will be able to take up item number 1. If we can take items 2 and 3 now for a vote, then. Please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
So again, for that is approved for the folks that are here from Government 101. We just voted on those 2 items on consent, so there was no discussion. Items 2 and 3, and also item 4, since that was moved to be received and filed. If we can take up item 4 as well, please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote. Oh, we did number 4 as well. Okay, we did it without objection. So items 2, 3, and 4 have now been taken care of. If we can go to the next set of items, please.
Mr. President, items 5 through 11 are items for which public hearings have been held.
Okay. Anybody wishing to reopen any of the hearings or call special? Mr. Kretz.
If I could call item 5 special for Mr. Krikorian.
Okay. Item number 5, Mr. Kretz calls special for Mr. Krikorian. Are there special items, colleagues? If not, we will take up the balance. That's items 6 through 11. Please, let's see if we can take a vote. Open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 12 through 26 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay. When the clerk said 10 votes are required for consideration, items that are waived out of committee, 10 members have to accept them in, and then we can consider them. So if there's no objection, those are before us. Special items, Mr. Labange and Mr. Rosendahl after. 21 for Mr. Labange. Mr. Rosendahl?
17 and 19.
Yep. Mr. Rosendahl calls that, and I'll also add 18. Oh, no. Okay. No, we can. We'll hold it on the desk. We'll hold it on the desk anyway because all the ordinances, we're still awaiting Mr. Alarcon and Mr. Krikorian. So let's hold 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 18.
And 18?
Yeah. Okay. That leaves us with items 20 and 21 through 26. Anybody wishing to call any of those special? If not, let's go ahead and open the roll on the balance. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay. That is approved. And Mr. Cardenas, if you look at the board, even though it's on ours, the board isn't reporting Ms. Hahn, so we just have the 14 members. Those are approved. Next items, please.
Mr. President, just
yes,
before
Mr.
I didn't need to call it special, is anyone here for item 24, the Bridge Improvement Program? Okay, I'll talk about the road.
You want to reconsider that and call that special?
City staff, I'll handle it.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Mr. Labange will discuss that offline. If we can take the next items, please.
Mr. President, items 27 through 31 are items noticed for closed session.
Now, this is another section of the council meeting for our guests that are here today. Closed session items are the only ones in which we can go into private closed session based on California state law, usually considering two areas. One is if we have labor negotiations and we need to be caught up on our negotiations with our city unions, and for obvious reasons we can't make that public or else there's no point in negotiating. And the second is for lawsuits where we can't expose our legal strategies if the city's being sued or something like that. So items 27 through 31 today are noticed for closed session. We still have to have public hearings on them if anybody wishes to address the council before we go into closed session. But many of these we dispose with in open session. And on that note, I will turn to our chair of our Budget and Finance Committee, which takes these up, Mr. Parks, for some guidance on these items.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we hear 27 through 31 in open session.
Okay.
And just to advise you that very shortly the city attorney is going to have a new ordinance forthcoming that we probably will not be seeing these in the future because by the new state law, they must have the city attorney must be able to settle these while in court or otherwise be sanctioned. So a new ordinance will be coming.
Okay.
So workers' comp cases that are by basically by percentage and dollar value are going to be structured within the workers' comp law.
Very good. Okay. Let's go ahead and walk through those then. I think we do have a card on one, so we'll call that special item number 28. We'll call that special for cards from the public later, but let's take up 27 and then 29, 30, and 31. Item 27.
Item 27, there is a recommendation for settlement in the case entitled Richard Beach versus City of Los Angeles through one stipulated award with an estimated new money payout of $126,816.96 after taking credit for $38,473 that has previously been paid.
Okay. Anybody wishing to be heard on 27?
I'd like to ask staff to come up on them.
On 27, okay, let's hold that.
27,
we'll just do the consent items then.
30 and 31.
All of them? Okay, so Mr. Rosendahl will call those all special. We can't, we'll take guidance from the city attorney whether we should go into closed session for those, Mr. Rosendahl, or,
yeah, it's up
or
to
do
the
up them
city
later?
attorney.
Okay. Okay, if we're going to have discussion, we'll go into closed session then. Mr. Rosendahl calls all those special for closed session. All right, good morning, Mr. Alarcon. Let's go ahead and take up then the ordinances, except for one of them in which Mr. Koretz needs to, so all but 16. Let's take up items 1, 12 through 15, and then 18 as well. Oh, no, that was called special, I'm sorry. So let's go ahead on those ordinances 1, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. As soon as Mr. Krikourian is here, we'll take up the additional one, item number 16. If we go to the next items, please.
Mr. President, on the continuation agenda, items 32 and 33 are items for which public hearings have been held.
Okay. Anybody wishing to call 32 or 33 special from the council? If not, let's go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Okay. Those are approved. We will next go to our general public comment. This is for, again, for items that are not on today's agenda, but nevertheless under the jurisdiction of the council. We can briefly respond under state law, but usually we have to just listen to what the concerns are, and we can talk privately to constituents when they come to us. Some may ask, why can't you have a debate or discussion with constituents? And for the folks that are here for Government 101 today, let me give you the legal explanation, which is that let's say somebody comes here and wants to talk about the draining of Echo Park Lake, which is happening as a part of the cleanup in Echo Park. If they come here and we start to discuss with them and start making decisions, all the other people that wanted to come to discuss the Echo Park Lake weren't notified of it, which is why it has to be something on the agenda. But if somebody wants to express their opinions to us about that Echo Park Lake item, they're able to do that. We're able to listen. We can talk to them privately, but if in our capacity as a decision-making body, we can't engage with them beyond a couple words of response. So our first speaker is actually one of the participants in Government 101 and a frequent speaker here too, Ankur Patel. If you'd like to come forward as our first public comment speaker. Good morning again.
Morning. Again, I like to be more of an asset than a gadfly. I go to a lot of meetings, not just City Council, but Government 101. And your 5-minute speech, I appreciated it. You know, I come out here, I might come out as cynical and anti-establishment, this and that, but Council President Garcetti gives a good 5-minute rap, no doubt. I've talked about the safe routes to school before, and I've got some documents that I'd like to give to Councilmember Englander. Northridge Vision is going to be going on later today. I'm going to head out to that. So can I get this to Councilmember Englander?
We'll give it to the Sergeant at Arms, and we'll make sure.
Rosendahl and Garcetti. Just
Thank
because,
you.
These are, what they are is undergraduates at CSUN did a safe routes to school type of program for Sylmar High School and San Fernando High School. These are pretty nice documents, professionally published. Undergraduates have gone through all this work, and again, we'd like to plug into the Safe Routes to School program, right? I know the city is going to be putting together a task force. I've heard rumors about that. There's a lot of money out there, and again, being more of an asset than a gadfly. So I'm going to get to Hannah Lee about this later. I'm going to hopefully get to some more of your transportation people. But, you know, I also come out here, and yesterday, City Treasurer's Investment and Cash Management Report. Right, $6 billion document about how we invest in Coca-Cola and Nike, and I continue to bring that up. The other thing that I brought up yesterday is how much money is in the general fund. This is one of the things that Council President Garcetti can't respond to. How much money is in the general fund today? It's a little bit difficult to find out, and I actually did file a California Public Records Act request with the city controller. And the information that you get back is a summary of trial balances. And in 10 seconds, I can't go over what a summary of trial balances is other than it's meaningless. No dates, no names, just $100 million here, $100 million there. And so again, when I say I want more information, I want some more valuable information, not just empty envelopes.
Thank you. We're happy to work with you to see if we can get you more robust information. John Walsh is our next speaker. After that will be Olga Hall.
John Walsh, blogging at Hollywood Highlands, HIGHLANDS.org. CRA, go to redevelopment.com. That's an anti-CRA. You know, they said I was psychotic when I said that I would outlive the CRA. Well, on October 1st, I will outlive the CRA. Maybe not, because remember what I said about Rupert Murdoch the other day here, and then another critic of his was found dead in London yesterday, so I might not make it. Department of Children and Family Services, we have a complaint there about basically selling children to well-known politicians when he should be adopting rather than taking to foster children. Read about it on my website. Incidentally, you know, they are opening a bar and nightclub inside the LAPD. I understand that one night a week it will be a gay bar. So that's great. We are now the only city on the planet that has a gay bar inside police headquarters. Go. Tim McOsker for City Council. Hey, remember who, yeah, and incidentally, I can't mention you, but look who I'm pointing to. Ever since Mr. Rosendahl was the target of homophobic comments that I pointed out, the city council person who made him has been like a church mouse, as quiet as a church mouse. We don't hear any more homophobia from Mr. Cardenas. The most politically incorrect thing in LA, what would that be? It's on our website. That would be a 50-gallon plastic bag of 100-watt bulbs. The most incredibly politically incorrect. The mayor wanted to open the freeway, and he opened it on time. It was a secret schedule. It was supposed to open at 12 noon on Sunday, and he opened it. That 5 a.m. the next day was BS. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Thank you. Ms. Hall, just before you speak, we do need to take up one item, and Mr. Koretz, I think, is going to recuse himself for it on one of the ordinances while we still have 13 members. So if we can take up item 16, Mr. Koretz is off the board. We had the public hearing. This was for the expansion of the East Hollywood Business Improvement District, and we had folks here speaking on that on Friday. If we can please open the roll on item 16. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved, and that will be expanded for another decade in East Hollywood, I believe, as well. If we can send that forthwith, please. We'll go back to our general public comment. Olga Hall will be our next speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. President and members of the council. This morning, I'm here to announce the fundraiser that we are going to have for the Southwest Museum. And I hope all of you that spoke so vehemently about saving it, that you will purchase tickets, you will donate, because we need to take Autry to court. There's no other alternative for us. The truth is there, and you didn't listen to it. I hope you participate and really show your effort to help the Southwest Museum, the first museum in Los Angeles. So this Sunday will be the fundraiser. I hope to see you there.
And Galco is a great place to get sodas from all around the world, so thank you for doing that.
It's a great program for Sunday, so it'll be a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you, Olga, for doing that. Appreciate it. Arnold Sachs is our next speaker. After Mr. Sachs will be Deborah Greenspan. Oh, there he is over there, Mr. Sachs.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President. Two things about your Government 101 class. Item 16 is part of your items for public hearings that have not been held on today's agenda. And you neglected to tell the students here that unless the council makes a motion on any items that are being discussed, no action will be taken, especially if they don't make a motion and that motion isn't seconded. So there might be a lot of discussion they hear, but if no councilman steps up and says, I'd like to make a motion to further move that idea along, then it just stays in council chambers and all you've heard is a long-winded discussion. That being said, I'd like to make some comments because I didn't have an opportunity when you passed the nomination of Mr. De La Vega to be Transportation Committee Chairman. And he mentioned that he wanted to do LAPD training for the DOT officers. It was long overdue. And I'm wondering, as assistant mayor in charge of transportation policies, why he wouldn't put that into effect when he was assistant mayor, because he was in charge of transportation policies for the mayor, and why he wouldn't have the opportunity to put his long overdue program into effect because he worked for transportation projects for over 15 years, just out of curiosity. That being said, a little bit of commentary about this wonderful arena. You may have been reading about the Dodger fiasco with Frank McCourt, but the interesting part about that in the recent newspaper stories is Frank McCourt denies that he's being paid by the Los Angeles Dodgers. And that could very well be true because he has divided up the assets of the Dodgers into several different corporations. So while the city is having discussions with AEG regarding the football stadium, keep in mind AEG is divided up into several different corporations. And the one that will be running the stadium may not be the one that the city council is talking to.
Mr. Sachs,
so we will get hammered on that.
If you'd like to speak on 16, my apologies. If you'd like to speak now, we can do that
Yes,
as well.
thank you. On item number 16, again, I ask, because you mentioned in previous discussions that the city-owned property will always vote in favor of the BIDs, how many city properties are involved in this East Hollywood BID? And in addition, the bid is to be overseen by the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. And the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce running the East Hollywood Business Improvement District. How many other business improvement districts and property improvement districts are within that area of Hollywood that would be run by the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce? Because it makes sense that the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce would operate in Hollywood, never mind East Hollywood. So do they operate around the Kodak Theater? Do they operate around, let's say, Sunset and Vine? Do they operate? What are boundaries of the different business and improvement districts? And does that corporation oversee these other business improvement districts? And if it doesn't, why not? Because it is, after all, the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. They do fund the stars throughout Hollywood on the sidewalk. So that's my questions, and I appreciate some answers. Thank you.
Thank you. The only city property I know of, and the one is Barnsdall Art Park, sir, and also there are 3 other bids in Hollywood. None of the others are run by the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. This is the only one. I hope that's helpful. We'll go next to Deborah Greenspan, who is our next speaker. Thank you for your patience. And next, after that, will be Juanita Arevalo. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President and City Council. I want to thank you for this Government 101 program. I wish more people could attend. I want to thank Member Cardenas and for your wisdom on the staying of the truancy tickets. I ask that there are future investigations into schools, including in the San Fernando Valley, that gather students in the auditoriums on campus when they're late to class, making them absent, not late. That the monies that the parents are having to pay in fines goes right back to the school systems, which gives them then incentive to do more of that behavior to the students and less of mentoring and guiding for a better outcome. For too long, the emphasis on negative consequences in schools instead of mentoring and positive reinforcement have created economic degradation of the city. It is not the economy creating a school crisis. It's the schools. The school is the tail that's wagging the dog of the economy. Please provide no money to schools unless pathways to free public programs are provided, including the Princeton Review, which schools have notoriously left out of the packets when they give to parents, and that they need to provide better outcomes, positive behavior, role modeling, and respectful behavior towards families, including special needs families. And also, if you can maybe create a financial 101 for school staff and administrators so that they know how to handle the money that they do have instead of just trying to get more and more from the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony today. Juanita Arevalo is our next speaker, and then Mr. Armando Herman.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
President and councils. My name is Juanita Arevalo. I'm from the Valley. I'm a very concerned and discouraged and upset parent. We've been having a lot of issues in regards to our education, and our councils need to pay more attention to the education of our students. We have met with some of the councils here, and I do hope they take this into consideration because we are your constituents. I don't know if you're aware about LUSD, all the corrupt, fraudulent issues that are going on with administration and our superintendents, not to mention our board members. Basically, they're controlled by the mayor. We went to Sacramento, we went to Washington. We have a young lady at Parent Community Service Branch, which is on Temple and Douglas, I believe. She's taken over Mr. Downey's position. But this individual is basically being corruptive with us parents in the sense of bullying us, threatening us, telling our parents that the ones that are immigrant that they're going to be oust. And to me, when they say immigrant, it's somebody that is not born in USA. It's not just specifically Hispanic. It's people from Canada, Russia, Vietnam, Tokyo, Japan, various states. Also, we need our constituents that we've met with some of you guys already from local 1 through 8 districts. Like I said, I hope you take this into very good consideration because we're tired of bureaucracy and we're tired for our students to be stolen from good education that they deserve. Charter schools are not as good as people think. It's basically who's selling the education to the highest bidder. So please, I'm asking you guys, especially Mr. Cardenas, Alarcon, and Huerta and Perry, please pay attention to the parents that have gone to meet with y'all, and please take into consideration that our kids come first. Education is not supposed to be sold to the highest bidder. We need the best for our education. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juanita. Appreciate it. Colleagues, you probably heard me speaking to the Government 101 class. If you all want to stand up, we'd like to give you a round of applause and thank you for spending this day with us here today. These are constituents from around the city that are learning about the basics of city government. It is 9:30 and I want to keep you guys on schedule, so you're dismissed to go up to the rooms and to get the next sessions. Thank you for seeing a little bit. I know you didn't get to hear a discussion of the items we'll be talking about today, but you can catch it on Channel 35 tonight at home or online. Thank you again and have a good rest of the morning. Our next speaker, as those folks file out, is Mr. Armando Herman, and after that will be Merv Evans. Is Mr. Armand here? Armando? Herman. Sorry, I didn't know if you... Herman, Mr. Armando Herman. If you could come forward, and then Merv Evans will follow Mr. Herman.
Good morning, Council. Regarding the CRA, I came across just this little bit of information, but to no surprise, why is it on First and Boyle that the CRA investment is at 100% in taxes when it's all said and done? Is that fair? Projects such as the First Street improvement of the Mariachi area, still not complete. Cesar Chavez and Boyle Heights, only one facility is being built so far, which is a Walgreen. Yet, the engineering, the planning has been completed. All the city has to do is get City Council to approve the last procedure or the last steps to create a better economy, possibly. But my understanding is from City Hall is that many are saying there's still a bad budget, Mr. Herman. Financially, the city is broke. But yet, we're asking you to pay more taxes. Pay more taxes? That's ridiculous. Because, again, the services that should be rendered to its constituents, to its taxpayers, and its taxpayers should be implemented at any time and day. There is no enforcement. Ordinances and violations of the law under city law are not being handled appropriately. All I ask is that you appropriately take action. Unfortunately, Mr. Huizar stepped out. I wish to speak to him face to face in regards to these projects that I mentioned earlier and the day before. But Mr. Garcetti, you came up with an idea, right? Your graffiti implement, is that something new and creative? I talked to you about that in the past. So I hope in the future and now something gets done with City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weezer had to leave. I know he was going to a funeral in Boyle Heights for one of the activists that we adjourned in memory of just last meeting, but I'm sure he will be back on Friday. Mr. Merv Evans is our last speaker for a general public comment. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be at council, and hopefully soon we'll be a member of council. I'm asking today that you direct the Department of Water and Power Commission to conduct a study and determine if we can go to a differential rate for our senior citizens. Far too many of our senior citizen homeowners are literally at a brink. We need to do everything we can to keep our seniors in their homes. Lowering water and power rates for seniors may not cause that much of a burden to the city. Asking the Department of Water and Power to conduct a survey, to come back with a public policy options document for a more preferential rate for our senior homeowners is the minimum we can do. Thank you, Merv Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Appreciate comments. Yes, Mr. Labange.
The Department of Water and Power does have a lifeline for seniors. If you'd like to step to the ropes, I'll make sure that you understand that. They do reach out, as well as our Bureau of Sanitation, for collection. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 5 was no longer needed to be special by Mr. Krikorian. If we can take up item 5, if we can please prepare the roll on 5 and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
If we can send 25 forthwith, and if we can take up 21 from Mr. Labange. Real quick, I know you had a quick amendment.
Yes, this is a friendly amendment for the volunteers. It helps, and Mr. Parks on the friendly amendment asks that this go before the Finance Committee annually. Is that correct, Mr. Parks? Mr. Parks?
No, we just like to amendment that asks that this report, because it came out of Budget and Finance, that this volunteer update status report be done in conjunction with each year's budgetary reports in April of each year.
Okay. Without objection. And we had to take a $2 administrative fee for that.
That's okay. And also a salute to Chris Marita, the Assistant City Librarian, and Mr. Gomez, the librarian, for the great job on Measure L.
Thank you. Our libraries are back open on Monday. Thank you, Mr. Labange, Mr. Parks, and Ms. Perry as well. Let's go ahead and prepare the roll on 21 as amended and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. If we can take up the next item called, well, actually 17, if we can hold that on the desk. If we can take up next item number 19, which Mr. Rosendahl called a special. Mr. Rosendahl, if you'd like to take up item 19 now. Mr. Rosendahl, item number 19 on the bicyclists, if you'd like to take that up.
Good morning. Colleagues, this is a historic day. This item 19 is anti-harassment of cyclists. And I'd like staff to come on up and explain, the City Attorney's Office, what this piece of legislation is that if you approve it and it becomes law, will be the first in the nation. And frankly, this proposal is designed to address cyclists who are out there and vulnerable every time they get on a bicycle. It creates a private cause of action that allows cyclists who are victims of discrimination on the roadway to pursue the matter civilly rather than wait for law enforcement to act. Basically, the city will, as it does in other discrimination laws that establish a right to sue, provide for treble damages and attorney's fees. Generally, people who sue for a tort cannot recover attorney's fees. And so unless there are very serious injuries or unless the person suing is wealthy, it is almost impossible to get an attorney to represent you. By allowing for the recovery of attorney fees, people might be able to get a lawyer to represent them, even if they are only slightly injured or did not suffer physical injuries. This ordinance is certainly not a cure, but it is one more step toward recognizing that our public streets are for all users, not just automobiles. I might say, colleagues, that I personally hadn't ridden a bike in over 30 years. I was actually afraid to get on a bicycle and get out there because I was afraid I was going to get hit by a car. So 2 weeks ago, I took a class, I put the helmet on, and I got on a bicycle. And frankly, it all came back. And I was out there with a group of cyclists on the roads, first on very private sort of, residential streets, and then we ended up on Venice Boulevard and also on Centinela. And what we don't realize when we're just an automobile person is that the cyclist has rights too. And if they need to use a lane, we just have to be patient behind a cyclist instead of just pushing them off to the right. Because if you push them off too far to the right, there's no space between them and a parked car, and you need at least 3 feet there, or somebody opens up their car door and can just nail you like that. So there are rights that should be as clear for all of us who ride our automobile for cyclists. And what this does is put some teeth out there for cyclists when they have actions. And if I could ask the city attorney to give a brief legal description, and there is public comment on this before we vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Good morning, Deputy City Attorney Judith Reel. The draft ordinance before you creates a cause of action for bicyclists who are harassed because of their status as bicyclists. It establishes treble damages of at least $1,000 per incident, authorizes an award of attorney's fees, and, where warranted under state law, punitive damages.
Thank you. And if we could go to public comment, Mr. President.
Okay, we have Mr. Koretz, and then we have a few cards. You want to do the cards right now, Mr. Koretz, either way? Okay, we'll go to the speakers first. First, we have Jeff Jacobberger. He'll be followed by Arnold Sachs. Always good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning, Jeff Jacobberger. I represent the 10th District on the city's Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I'd like to thank Councilmember Wesson for his support of bike issues and giving me the opportunity to serve my community. On this issue, I'd like to thank Councilmember Rosendahl and his staff and the Office of the City Attorney with working with bicycle advocates on the language of the ordinance. I'd just like to offer a few words about the need for the ordinance. I mean, the vast majority of drivers in Los Angeles are actually considerate of bicyclists, and this is really targeted at the very small handful that aren't. I'd just like to give you a couple examples. One evening I was riding my bike down La Brea Avenue, and a passenger leaned out of their car window and tried to push me over. Last Friday I was riding up Cahuenga Boulevard to the Ford Amphitheater. There's 2 lanes northbound. I was in the right-hand lane. The left-hand lane was clear, but motorists decided they needed to sit behind me and lay on the horn and scream and kind of rev their engine. And it's that tiny fraction of people that this ordinance is really aimed at. These incidents actually are crimes, but when you report them to LAPD, they don't do anything about it, and quite understandably so. They're overworked. There are much more serious crimes in the city of Los Angeles. And by giving a private right of action, we allow, I think, LAPD to focus on the more serious crimes and allow these sorts of incidents to be handled through the civil court process. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobberger. Arnold Sachs is our next speaker. After that will be J.J. Hoffman.
Yes, thank you. Good morning again, Arnold Sachs. It's a problem, harassment of bicycles. But if you want to put them on the road, Mr. Rosendahl, you need to make sure that, A, they have lights on their bikes. They need to have an audible device on their bikes if they're going to be operating just like cars. They need to have reflectors on their bikes just like cars need to have brake lights. And the riders should have helmets, just like motorcyclists. And use of sidewalks. Do you have an ordinance that pertains to bicyclists who harass pedestrians on sidewalks? I'm all for making sure bicyclists are safe. But what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if they want to be on the streets, they need to also know that you need to maintain the speed, just like a vehicle law states. The vehicle code states maintain the speed of the highway. It's as fair to the drivers as it is to the bicyclists. And to give them undue credit is not fair.
J.J. Hoffman is our next speaker. After that will be Ross Hirsch.
Hello, thank you so much for presenting this to the council and for allowing us to speak. I'm with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition, and we strongly support this ordinance. We feel like this ordinance will send a very strong, clear message statewide, and also link to the 3-foot passing bill, which we would really like to see put together. And I think that this will go a long way towards making that happen. This bill, this ordinance, along with 3-foot passing, will definitely send a message to motorists that cyclists have rights and that we are vulnerable and we need to be safe. I have had over 20 years cycling in this city. I can think of countless times when I've been harassed and I've been put in danger. But one incident that I'd just like to repeat is I had a superior that I worked with who every morning she would see me on my bicycle and she thought it was really funny to come up real close to me in her Mercedes and honk on her horn really loudly and scare me. And she just thought it was funny. It took me a lot of time and courage because she was my superior to explain to her that every time she did that, I almost would have an accident. She didn't know. I think there are a lot of people who don't understand cyclist rights. They don't understand what we go through. We need to explain to them what we go through, what we're doing on the street, that we're just like them. We're just trying to get where we're going, and we're trying to do it in a safe, healthy, and clean way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ross Hirsch is our next speaker, and then Ingrid Peterson. Good morning.
Good morning, council members. My name is Ross Hirsch. I'm an attorney here in Los Angeles, and I bike to and from my office every day. I live in Los Feliz, and I bike here to downtown on a bike lane. Yesterday, a woman on her bike stopped, pulled up next to me, and she asked for a bike store. And I showed her where a bike store was, and it's right around the corner. And she said today was her first day biking in Los Angeles. She moved here from Boston. She's just starting school at FITM right here. And she chose to live in the Silver Lake district because there was a bike lane all along Sunset to get her to downtown. So that was the choice she made. I think that's a pretty responsible choice. Don't we want to support that choice? I think we want more people like that. Perhaps more people will move to Los Angeles. Perhaps more people will come to Los Angeles and spend their tourism dollars here if it is a cycling-friendly neighborhood, community you can get from place to place. So we want to encourage that. Through that encouragement, this law will help us enforce cyclists' legitimate rights to the road. And through that enforcement, we also get education of drivers to let them know. So we minimize these interactions that potentially can create conflict between drivers. And through that education, through that enforcement, we get encouragement and we get more and more cyclists. I call those the 3 E's: encouragement, enforcement, and I want to mention a third one: equality. The way I see this, it's cyclist civil rights. Cyclists are vulnerable road users. I don't have a steel metal box around me to protect me in case something comes into my way. A pothole is all it takes, or a little bit of gravel is all it takes when I get a water bottle thrown at me to go down. God forbid I fall in traffic, there it goes. I need to get home safely for these guys. These guys need to ride safely. They're going to be riding on our roads soon. We need to make sure that they can do it safely. I want them to bike to work. I want them to bike to school. They need to do it safely, and this law will help do that. It'll send the message that cyclists are out there. Treat them respectfully. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing the 2 young guests to the City Council as well today. I hope they're enjoying their civics lesson. Ingrid Peterson is our next speaker. After that will be Don Ward.
Hello, good morning. I come here in the name of reasonable, balanced traffic and mode share, not just for bikes, but to encourage all of us to look at this ordinance as a chance to see exactly what Ross was saying, to see it as a chance to educate everyone who uses the road to share it. And in that vein, I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank Tom LaBonge, Eric Garcetti, Bill Rosendahl, and everyone else who helped with Ciclavia. That event was a beautiful and magical, special, wonderful event. Thank you so much. I think the spirit of that event can be harnessed to help this ordinance really go into the reasonable kind of no-brainer, like what Rosendahl was saying earlier. It's a no-brainer to think we should protect our children, that we should protect people who choose to bike. I also, of course, have a car, and when I see cyclists, I usually don't try to, hammer them or ride them off the road. And just for the record, I have been hit. People have leaned out of their car and smacked me and intimidated. And for that reason, I think when women in children, when they approach riding a bike, they really want to see that there's a safety element that everyone kind of supports. And I think to do it in this context is amazing. So thank you so much, and continue doing the good work. We can see what you're doing, and I personally really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Don Ward is our next speaker. After that is Allison Manos. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Council, for considering this ordinance. Thank you, Bill Rosendahl, for bringing this ordinance to the Council. And I just want to echo exactly what Ross and Ingrid said. We want to create a culture in our city where people feel comfortable using active transportation. It's healthy, it's good for traffic, it's good for reducing pollution. We should be able to see our kids have the ability to ride safely to school, and this ordinance will help promote that kind of culture in our city, and it's good for the health of the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Don. Allison Manos is our next speaker. After that is Jay Slater.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Allison Manis with LA County Bike Coalition. And firstly, I want to thank Councilmember Rosendahl for sponsoring this motion. I remember about a year ago when there was about 3 of us at a T committee meeting wondering if this was even going to be able to legally pass muster. So I'm really happy to hear that it's moved forward. And, you know, for me, it's very personally connected because about 2 months ago, I was riding home up Glendale Boulevard from work, and a driver was driving really close to me and actually hit my elbow, and I wobbled a little and almost fell off my bike. And when I got their license plate number and called LAPD, there was nothing that we could do because the anti-harassment ordinance was still being studied. And so for me and for a lot of our members, this is a really meaningful ordinance, and I'm really happy to just see this more, this sort of strong local support for cyclists on the road and other people who choose not to, use cars to get around. So thank you.
Thank you. Jay Slater is next. After that is Dennis Heineman. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the council. My name is Jay Slater. I am the chairman of the Los Angeles Bicycle Advisory Committee. Over the past couple of months, I've had a tremendous pleasure of working and meeting individually with, I think it's now 10 members of the council. And your support of bicycle issues in each and every case has been exemplary. And on behalf of the Bicycle Advisory Committee and on behalf of the cycling community, we want to thank you tremendously for what you're doing. And with that, I want to, obviously I'm here to support the anti-harassment language. We think that this is another great step in moving forward the process of making it safer for cycling in the city of Los Angeles. It also ties beautifully, perfectly into the bike plan that you all voted in, I believe unanimously, in April. And this gives us a chance to put just another step closer to motorists and people on the street understanding what cycling is about, and it makes it safer for us, and we will get more people cycling, we will get more cars off the street, we will improve our air, we will make this a better city, a safer city for all of us. Look what happened, God bless me for saying this, Carmageddon. Last weekend, we saw more bikes out there. I was out there. I was at first afraid to get on my bike and go out. I thought, oh boy, I'm going to be fighting cars all over the place. Well, we actually rode on part of Sepulveda Boulevard, not up in the pass, but we figured Sepulveda would be a mess. And much to our delight, it wasn't. And it showed what can happen when we get on the streets and we don't have to duke it out with cars. We don't have to have that 5,000-pound car against that 170 pounds of bicycle and rider, in my case. A lot of them are a lot thinner than I am. Anyway, one final thought. This is, again, another step. We need you to support this thing. We want this passed. We want to see this become part of the city law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your great activism. Dennis Heineman is next, and after that is Ted Rogers. Good morning.
Hi, my name is Dennis Heineman, and we should look toward the most successful Northern European countries and how they are able to get a great deal of bicycling. And one of those elements is very stringent laws protecting the vulnerable bicyclists. And fortunately, in the city of Los Angeles, we require that the bicyclists share the road with motorized vehicles. This creates some very harrowing experiences for the bicyclist, and including throwing cigarette butts at them, soda, coffee, trying to run them off the road. Several of those I've heard about or experienced myself. And when you do that with vulnerable travelers such as bicyclists, it discourages them. And we certainly don't need, in the city of Los Angeles, to be discouraging bicycling. We need to have more of this. And this law seemingly is perhaps would be considered unenforceable. But with modern technology, we're dealing with phone cameras which easily record this. And this will end up helping to encourage more people to bicycle. Most people will not interact with motorized vehicles, and to know that they have a law standing behind them would encourage them. Thank you.
Mr. Ted Rogers.
Good morning. I'm Ted Rogers. I write the column Biking in LA, and I'm a board member of the LACBC. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Rosendahl for his work on this. I'd like to thank Mr. Garcetti, who over almost 2 years ago promised me that this would not be forgotten, and thank you for keeping that promise. I'd like to thank Judith Reel and Michelle Mowry for their work on this. The problem that we face right now has been exemplified by one speaker who already came up here and said that bikes are required to ride the same speed as cars under state law. That's not true. There is no minimum speed limit under state law. That's the problem that we face every day, that drivers think they know the law and they don't, and they try to enforce it with their cars. I myself have been a victim of a driver who used her car as a weapon to intentionally hit my bike, knock me to the ground. When the police were called, they investigated it as a traffic accident rather than an assault, and they walked away leaving me with nothing to support my case. They failed to investigate it properly. I was left with $2,500 in medical bills and no way to recoup on that because there was no police report in my favor. This law addresses that directly. It would have allowed me to take this woman to court and recoup those medical bills, recoup the lost wages, recoup the damages to my bike. When I tried to get an attorney to take this to court, I was unable to get an attorney because they said, well, your maximum damages are maybe $3,000, $4,000. Our legal bills will cost more than that. I ended up having a friend of mine take the case to court on my behalf as a favor. And even with his minimal charges, his own expenses came to more than the award we ended up with. That is why this ordinance is so desperately needed to help us protect ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no other public speaker cards. Mr. Koretz will be our first speaker in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of course, Mr. Rosendahl and I both heard, as did other members of the Transportation Committee, horror stories that people had experienced while riding their bicycles. People throwing things at them, people making sudden stops to try and cause accidents, people trying to nudge them over to the side of the road to cause an accident. Cyclists often are sort of the targets of road rage in a way, and to a very limited degree I experienced it myself this weekend because I made probably a mistake of getting on a bicycle for the first time in 15 years and cycling up to the Skirball Museum because I didn't want to have to try and get there by car during Carmageddon, which I thought would take several hours of backed up traffic on Sepulveda. Of course, I had the opposite experience. When I got to Sepulveda, I found there were virtually no cars, and those that were there were so exhilarated to find no traffic that they were whizzing by as fast as 50, even 60 miles an hour. The frightening part was I was far to the right lane of 2 lanes. Most cars could see me a mile away. They would move to the next lane, or even if they stayed in my lane, they would stay a little to the left and make sure they didn't hit me. There were a couple that clearly whizzed past me within an inch or two of my elbow just because that was what they chose to do. these kind of things happen. And I'm not a great cyclist. Wobbly as I am, I actually could have been harmed by these folks trying to scare me. The fact that there are people still on the road like this, I think is something that the city needs to address. We can't allow people to continue to have things thrown at them, to have people spit on cyclists, to have them try to cause harm to them. And I'm very pleased that we're taking this step to protect the cyclists of the city of Los Angeles.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our transportation chair for really seeing this through and making sure this happened. Mr. Rosendahl, bicyclists in Los Angeles, myself included, owe you a debt of gratitude today, and I'm proud to be part of the chorus to make sure, because any of us who have ever biked here have had these spills, have had these interactions. I don't want to say that the city of Los Angeles, that bikers' blood is all over the streets, but at least in the small bits, anybody who's gotten the raspberries and the skids and everything of falling, whether it's because of roads or because of drivers and bus drivers as well that often don't care. And we got to do our work with Metro to make sure our bus drivers are really well educated, since there's synchronicity between, I think, our bicyclists and our public transportation system. This will be really important, and this will be important not just for LA but for this country to see, because if LA, the capital of cars, can do it, we can do it anywhere from Carmageddon, we're going to have Cycletopia hopefully soon. And I think what was great is, if we can have such a great weekend to widen a road, which most of us probably feel is like throwing a slightly bigger sponge into the sea. It's going to be about as waterlogged when it opens as it was before the construction happened. We should really be looking at what we can do by having those sorts of closures to have other sorts of experiences. And that's what Ciclavia has been about. That's what Car-Free Sundays could be about. That's what moving this around the city is all about. Once people have that experience, it's kind of like public transportation. When the gas spike went up a couple years ago, we saw, I think, about 15% increase of riders on the Red Line. Then gas went back down and everybody thought the number would fall. It stayed right there because once people experienced what it was like to be on the subway on the Red Line, they said, hey, this is a pretty decent way of getting around. Same thing happens when we get one more cyclist out there. And don't worry, Mr. Koretz, if you're a little wobbly, you've got some of the best instructors in the city out there. They'll put some training wheels on, help you out, and make sure it gets done. But it's really great to be in a council that is so bicycle friendly, a mayor who has, through his own experiences, become a real strong advocate, and hopefully can take that message now in his leadership position as chair of the U.S. Conference of Mayors to make this a national priority so that we look at roads as not being just about cars, so we can look at transportation as always being multimodal, and that it starts first, though, with the safety of bicyclists. So thank you to the advocacy community for all you've done, and that man who's the bomb right there, Alex Baum. Thank you.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to stand and thank my colleagues, Councilmember Rosendahl, for his leadership in getting this done as chair of committee. It's about time. And as been stated, we've got our bicycle plan now in place. We have the advocacy, and I still have the friends out there in the Bicycle Coalition. I want to thank you. But more importantly, quite frankly, folks, we have hundreds and hundreds of people already on bikes who are transit dependent, people who are workers, who are trying to get to their jobs, who can't afford insurance, car payments, that are trying to survive on having to pay their rent and just to they're living on subsistence. And bicycle is the only way to get to and from their home, to work, and back. And quite frankly, you're taking care of them as well, to give them the ability to be on the street and to defend themselves. Hopefully we can see this in different languages, in English and Spanish, so that they will know how to advocate if someone does brush them or touch them or knock them over. They'll know what to do and how to do it based on the new law that's being presented. So I thank you for that advocacy, and thank you for making it safer for everybody, regardless of income, regardless of race and color, because everyone's a bicyclist. We're all sharing the road together. And that to me is very, very special. I have 4 youngsters, a 15, 17, 19-year-old who are always on bikes. My 20-year-old started getting on her bike too, and so they're out on the road, and it is frightening. And I always pray to God they'll come back when they leave, because you just never know given how crowded our streets are. So on a very personal level, on a community level, on an advocacy level, I commend you for your hard work, because without your advocacy, I don't think we've gone this far. Thank you so much.
Mr. Labange.
Everybody, everybody stand up who's ridden a bicycle in the last month. Let's just stand up right there, which is very good. So I want to give you all a big hand right there, including our city attorney. Good job, Judy. It's an opportunity that is changing. It's a developing way to move around, and it is positive. The gentleman who spoke about Northern Europe, they do have respect for, and other cities have respect for the bicycle. They do stop and look in their mirror and let the right-of-way pass. Education is so important. Education to all of us that there are more and more people. Tragically, there was an accident last night in the central city near an on-ramp. Tragically. And we have to know that we have to be aware of all these incidents to make the roads safer for people. And what Mr. Reyes said about children is so important. What the attorney said about his son riding his bike. And I think I saw you at Lucille in Sunset one morning as you were riding in. So this is a good milestone day. But I think it's important on the question, Ms. Mallory, just on one thing there too, on the issue of sidewalks. The mass of cycles on sidewalks may have a challenge to pedestrians that's been voiced to me. And if we use, and then sometimes going off a sidewalk into a street sometimes becomes a hazard. I just want to make sure we start to clear it. We've got to do it right in such a way. So what are other cities doing, and how do we prevent the accident that happens when someone leaves a sidewalk or someone's on a sidewalk and is not aware? And also Mr. Sachs, who is a public comment specialist, did speak about helmets, bells, and other things. What do you see? Because I know in European cities, they got a lot of bells on those bikes that they ring when they pass you on the left, and they do wear helmets.
Well, I'll address several issues here. Michelle Mallory, Department of Transportation. I'm the city's senior bicycle coordinator.
Speak right into the mic and look at Ms. Perry.
All right. With reference to sidewalk riding, it's my proposal that we actually look at what Seattle's doing. Seattle has a ordinance that allows bicyclists on sidewalks, but it requires them to slow down and requires mandates that if there is a collision between a bicyclist and a pedestrian, that the bicyclist is at fault. So they are required to slow down and behave around pedestrians. The current municipal code, the ordinance, states that bicyclists are not allowed to ride the sidewalks with a willful or wanton disregard for persons or property.
But to clarify, you can ride on a sidewalk.
It is not illegal to ride on the sidewalk.
Sidewalk. It's not illegal to ride on a sidewalk.
It's not illegal.
Except by ordinance, like a street like Hollywood Boulevard is by ordinance, correct?
The department has the authority to ban bicycling in a few areas. The boardwalk is one of them, Hollywood Boulevard in a few areas.
So I think we need that discussion because there's going to be more people riding, and safety is important, and the sharing the road and sharing the sidewalk. That's a good idea. I'm sure Mr. Rosendahl will have it in committee, and we can deal with that issue. Right, Bill? So that's good. How about those other issues?
With reference to helmet use and Northern European countries, I should mention that I just spent 2 weeks ago, I was in Denmark. 50% of their modes split in Copenhagen. They are riding bikes for transportation. They are using helmets more than ever in Europe. The current helmet law says that individuals under the age of 18, so children, are required to wear helmets. We highly recommend helmet use. But they are not required or mandated for adults.
Let's discuss it for safety and take statistical, do the right thing. I know there's a freedom about that, but let's look at those issues. How about bells, lights, and those other issues?
The current vehicle code reference requires reflectors, requires a headlight at night on the front of the bicycle. All those are required with the sale of a bicycle. So if you are riding at night, you're required to have reflectors and or a headlight.
And I think if we get cooperation, voluntary, I think it helps, enhance. Because if you take the road, it's going to be your road. And that's what we have to do to mind that issue. How about brakes? I see a lot of bikes without brakes.
The vehicle requires one brake.
Okay, so what about the bikes that don't have brakes? Or how does that work?
They're in violation of the California Vehicle Code.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, Madam City Attorney. What happens when there's a cyclist that goes in on a public street and they have a bicycle that's not to code? I mean, I'm just saying, as we graduate, everybody in this discussion. How do we balance these issues out?
My understanding is that if they're in violation of the vehicle code requirements, they can be cited by LAPD.
But after the fact, if there's an accident, or if, let's say, I was on the MTA board, there was sometimes conflict in collision.
Council member, if their failure to abide by the vehicle code contributed to the accident, then they would face liability for negligence at the very least.
Just as we evolve, and I'm proud of the evolution. I'm proud when I worked for John Farrell. I believe the first was between Barham and Zoo Drive along Forest Drive. The first, what we call bikeway, was 9-foot bikeway. I'm proud that the first section of the LA River Bikeway was in John's district and extended now in the district I'm honored to represent. I'm proud that the Alex Baum Bridge is there to connect people on the Los Angeles River Bikeway and other parts. All those things are pushing a great activity, and as we take these steps, I want to make sure the Office of the Department of Transportation informs us of what we should do, working with the Coalition for Los Angeles County Bikes, looking at other municipalities, to make sure we do all the right steps so this is a great percentage of the transportation mode that goes forward. So I wanted to congratulate everybody for their work. I especially want to shout out Alex Baum, stand up again. He not only advised Mayor Bradley for many, many years, Mayor Reardon, Mayor Hahn, and Mayor Rio Vagosa. God bless Alex Baum.
Thank you, Mr. LeBon. Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much. There's no question that this is long overdue. Unfortunately, it appears that by the fact that we don't have the kind of teeth we need to enforce the laws for cyclists when they've been egreged or wronged or knocked down, or in some cases worse than that, it seems that we don't have the kind of ordinance in place that will allow us to make sure that there's a true deterrent in this city, that people understand that it's not okay. I'll use a case in point. When this council passed the Animal Cruelty Task Force, when we started the process, we knew it was something positive and good, but in the middle of the process, we found out that there had not been one felony case brought to trial in over 20 years on animal cruelty. So by default, I believe that in our environment, in the city and county of LA, we were by default condoning bad behavior, very, very cruel behavior. And so I just wanted to stand up and say that I believe that Mr. Rosendahl, with your efforts and the chairman of the committee, by moving this as quickly as you have, we can't wait. We should not have to wait to make sure that we put the teeth into the law so that this behavior is not condoned. That people believe that by default, the fact that they may knock somebody down or what have you, and that person takes a license plate number and then finds out that nobody's going to do anything about it, by default, people are believing that this behavior is condoned, and it should not be condoned. Heaven forbid that someone at any age would actually be knocked down off their bike from somebody who willfully or maliciously does so, and then all of a sudden we as a society just stand there and say, no big deal. You're on a bike, so you're not protected. You're on a bicycle, so what? And I believe that right now it is a so what attitude that is being conveyed out there in our city, the second largest city in the country. I personally am afraid for myself, for my children, to be riding a bicycle outside of our immediate neighborhood. I live in a cul-de-sac, and it's kind of silly that I would tell my kids to stay in a cul-de-sac when they're riding their bike. That is really dumb. It doesn't make sense. Somebody should be able to ride on any given day 2 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles, 40 miles. People, as Mr. Reyes pointed out, they actually take bicycles to go to work. This is a means of transportation, yet at the same time, someone should not be afraid of their life, for losing their life, because they are trying to get to work by the only means that they have to get there. This is a very, very important step for the city of Los Angeles. And again, I believe that this is the first big step to make sure that people understand that this will not be condoned, and we should make a big deal out of the first and second and third and fourth and fifth and 10th case that comes to the point where people are actually being convicted of this wrongdoing, so that people get the message loud and clear that cyclists shall be respected and people shouldn't feel like their life is in danger just because they get on a bicycle in the city of LA. So once again, congratulations, Mr. Rosendahl.
Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, colleagues. This is quite a joyous moment for all of us. We've all told personal stories about a cycle. And when Mr. Reyes talked about his children and Mr. Cardenas talked about his children, we're all afraid about being on the road. This just gives us more protection. It is a historic moment for us. This is the first in the nation. Michelle Maury, I can't thank you enough. I know you've been pushing for this for years and giving cyclists protection and support. When I first took over the chair of this committee, which was 2 years ago, first thing I did was hold a town hall here and bring Charlie Beck, the great new chief. And he heard complaint after complaint of how cyclists are not given the support and respect on the road that they should get. That great chief has turned the dynamic around with the police. He's formed a task force and a committee. He's held 5 meetings with cyclists, and we've seen a tremendous interaction between the LAPD and it. And that was a wonderful plus to see that happen. And Paul Backstrom of my staff, who spent a lot of time on this for the last couple of years, I want to do a shout out for him. But you know, we all here can praise ourselves for the 5-year bike plan that you all approved that is now in force. We're creating 40 miles of bike lanes a year. We will have 200 of them over the next 5 years, and we will make that happen. So guys like me who are 66 years old, who are bouncing around, likes to get in a bike lane. When I got on one on Venice Boulevard, I got to tell you, I felt really good that I had at least a spot that I could feel somewhat safe in as I was riding my bicycle. So what we're doing right now is also video casting this, and this will be seen all over America on all the nice new social medias, and we hope that this will have a ripple effect so that other cities and counties and states also put a piece of legislation in front of their elected bodies to give cyclists rights and protections as they go on the road. So thank you all, and I look forward to a yes vote on this. Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. LaBonge.
He said it's seen all over the United States. I want to say hello to everybody in the United States, but also remember what Mick Jagger said in 12 by 5 at the end of a song. He said, if you're out at night and you're on your bike, don't forget to wear white. That's what Mick said 40 years ago. But cycling is so important. Congratulations. First steps. Everybody, more to do. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Big hand for Billy. One-time bike rider Rosendahl. More to come.
Thank you very much, Mr. LaBonge. Mr. Clerk, what is the matter before us, and what action must we take at this time?
Madam President, before you have a communication from the City Attorney and ordinance's first consideration relative to prohibiting the harassment of bicyclists.
All right. Mr. City Attorney? Do we need to have the City Attorney make this on the record? All right.
No, ma'am, just a vote.
Just open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Very good. Congratulations, Mr. Rosendahl. All right, what's our next item?
That brings us to item 17, called Special for Councilmember Rosendahl.
Mr. Rosendahl, item 17.
Let's go in the back. Yes, Madam President. What item are we talking about? Yes, I'd like the city attorneys to come up and explain this. I know this is trying to complement the Supreme Court's action on what I think is outrageous for the Supreme Court, derelict in its duty. The vote was 5-4, and once again it destroys any notion of campaign finance, and instead of being a puppy dog following the Supreme Court that I even wonder about, it would have put Bush in there as president when Al Gore got 500,000 more votes. What are we looking at today?
What you're looking at, good morning, council members, Deputy City Attorney Renee Stadel. What's before you today is a report from our office regarding the Supreme Court case, as well as a specific ordinance that only deals with the potential vacancy election that you'll be considering next regarding Council District 15. Specifically, what the ordinance before you does is suspends the trigger provisions in the city's campaign matching funds program that provides additional matching funds based on the spending of a non-participating candidate or an independent group. It would suspend it only for this election while we continue to discuss with the Ethics Commission more permanent changes to the entire matching funds program. The Supreme Court case at issue is called Arizona Free Enterprise Club versus Bennett. It concerned the Arizona Clean Money System, which had as a component of that system trigger provisions for matching funds based on the spending of a non-participating candidate or independent groups. The Supreme Court ruled that providing public matching funds in that system in that way, based on someone else's speech, was a chill to those non-participating candidates and independent groups, and a severe burden, and that those trigger provisions are in violation of the First Amendment. Because of the Supreme Court's decision, it's our advice that our provisions are substantially like those Arizona provisions and would not withstand court challenge.
Okay, it was vote 5-4, but Justice Kagan said, who countered it, that the main purpose of the law was to root out corruption and the appearance of corruption by encouraging candidates to participate in public financing systems, a goal the Supreme Court has endorsed. Like citizens across the country, Arizonians deserve a government that represents and serves them all, she wrote. And no less Arizonian deserves the chance to reform their electoral system so as to attain the most Americans of goals. Truly, democracy is not a game. So when you guys vote, I'm going to vote no on this. I just want to send a protest back to the Supreme Court that I think is doing a lousy job on a lot of things, and I'm just not going to follow their rules on an issue like this that has to do with reforming the political process, opening it up to clean money, and that's going to be my position on that. Thank you.
Mr. Alarcon. Mr. Alarcon.
Council members, I share the same concern with Councilmember Rosendahl on this issue. Frankly, wealthy people who would like to buy elections would have a greater opportunity to do so as a result of the Supreme Court decision. I don't even think the Supreme Court disputes that. That's a separate issue. The question is whether or not we can tailor our matching funds to address the Supreme Court decision in such a way that we incent candidates who are not wealthy to participate, to do the hard work of raising money, but at the same time perhaps getting matching funds to make them more competitive, to match a candidate who would have no disincentive for putting 1, 2, 3, 140 million, as we saw in the governor's race. So I'm introducing a motion to ask that we increase the matching funds provision to $200,000 for this, just for this special election, so that we can see the results and see what happens. To increase the matching funds provision by $100,000 to $200,000 in the primary election and the same in the general election, but also to increase the spending limit to allow candidates to be competitive, to increase the spending limit to $500,000 in the primary election and $450,000 in the general election. I do have a written motion to that effect. But the bottom line is this would allow candidates who will never be able to come up with $1 million to be competitive in a race where another candidate may come up with $500,000 in personal funds to contribute. And by the way, I believe, can I ask this question? Can they loan the money to their campaign and get it back? In the state legislature, candidates used to loan themselves, $250,000. There's one in particular I'm thinking of. I won't mention who it is, but a candidate used to loan themselves $250,000, and then they would be able to raise it back to their campaign and pay back the loan with 17% interest. And so, can we do that in the city of Los Angeles?
David Tristan, City Ethics Commission. Yes, there are provisions that allow candidates to repay themselves.
So
loans.
a wealthy candidate could drop, $500,000 on their campaign, and if they win, assuming they win, they could very easily raise that money back and pay themselves back. Well, working class candidates can't do that, and so I just think that we need to balance the scales. That was the original intent of the. I wish Mr. Rosendahl were back here. I don't know where he went, but this is something he should be very concerned about. The original intent of the multiplier, the accelerator clause, the trigger, as you called it, was to disincentivize wealthy people from throwing a lot of money in the race, and force. If they were going to throw money, they would have to go more than the cap. So I would urge you to support this modification just for this special election. Although I grant you it does set the tone for future elections, and I think that's a discussion that we have to have in the future. But for now, to balance the odds, I think we should increase the cap and increase the maximum matching funds.
Councilmember, I did want to clarify the repayment provisions would require a winning candidate to repay the loan prior to the date of the election. If the winning candidate has loans that are outstanding after the date of the election, under certain circumstances, they would lose that money. It'd become a contribution to the campaign.
Council, if you can raise money a year in advance, you put $500,000 in an account, nobody's going to run against you. I mean, that's the bottom line. Somebody puts $500,000 in a council race, it's going to fend off a whole bunch of candidates, so they can raise the money in the year and give it back to themselves. But in the meantime, they've destroyed other possibilities for the voters to have a diverse selection opportunity. So I'd like to ask for a second on this motion. I do have it in written form, but we haven't distributed it. So, Mr. Koretz,
I believe we
thank
have
you.
a second from Mr. Koretz. All right. It's Mr. Wesson.
Yeah, Mr. Alarcon, I understand that you don't want to identify the individual in Sacramento who used to do that, but I am requesting that you indicate that it was not Mr. Cardenas, that it was not Mr. Koretz, that it was not Mr. Krikorian, and that it was not myself.
That I think I can easily do, because I think we all know that this is essentially a working class city council.
All right, Mr. Parks is our next speaker.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, let me ask you, which court made this decision?
The United States Supreme Court.
Is that like the biggest in the land?
Yes,
okay.
it is.
All right, so there's no appeal.
No, they're the final
they're
decision
okay.
maker.
You know, colleagues, this is, I think, their second decision about independent campaign spending. We just changed our charter because one of them.
Yes, we just changed our charter to deal with a couple of provisions in our charter based on two other Supreme Court decisions that they've issued in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Colleagues, I think Mr. Alacon's motion about the cap has some merit, but what I would think we have to get updated overall on what you can get a basic contribution. We're struggling along here at $500 for council, $1,000 for mayor. Some of our surrounding cities give $2,500 for council. So how do you compete if somebody has, and I just went through a race where somebody put $1 point something million while we're trying to collect money at $500. I mean, how do you compete? You can't get enough matching funds to do that, and you can't go out and stay with a pace of $500 per contribution. So I think the real issue is that we have to look at the Supreme Court of the United States and say, they have said you can't manipulate the matching funds. They say you can't basically restrain independent campaigns. So the only thing we can do as a body is to start looking what's realistic to say what you can collect as an individual contribution, and then what is the cap that you can raise, because you're putting candidates and incumbents and everybody at a disadvantage if you're saying do it right, $500 per person, and do it right, this is your cap, and somebody, as in my case, said I'm not going to raise a dime because I don't want you to reach a certain level because I have an independent. So who are we punishing? And so the issue is that it's not, we run it periodically. We're still fighting the Reardon effect that people say he reached in his checkbook and wrote a check, but we haven't seen a lot of those come along since him. And, well, I'm saying that the issue is, but I think what we are dealing with on a more constant basis is how does a person stay in office or get in office if you're making them go baby steps, and other people can go in thousands and millions of dollars and not even have a campaign. Those are the things I think are more realistic in the sense of saying, should you be put in the situation to say, give me 500, and somebody's getting $1 million and saying, I don't even want a campaign, the independent will run it for me. I just need a website so I can put my stuff on it and they can steal it and make a campaign for me. And they'll even find some old stuff and find dead people to put on a campaign piece of literature. So these are the kind of things I think we have to look at and say, how do you find and revamp the system? Because the Supreme Court isn't going to change. The Supreme Court has made their decision. There's 3 decisions in the last few months or last couple of years. There's no appeal. I think we have to catch up with the Supreme Court and make it more viable for us as a body and those who come behind us.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I waived this out of committee just because of the timeliness of it, but certainly want to make sure that we have robust discussion because these are pretty important and pretty consequential things. We also we're both experts on it and not impartial, so I want to be very careful about making sure that anything, and I appreciate those who are not running for anything again and may not run for anything again have a different context than those who are and could be. But I wanted to just dig a little bit deeper into the recommendations that we had here, and our city attorney maybe walk us through a little bit more, because we've also heard from some folks in the kind of election reform community as well, who we've been chatting with, who have some ideas and might have some input on different ideas that council members have as well. But in terms of the trigger piece, right now, the additional amount of funds, if a provision is triggered in the general election right now, is $50,000, $100,000 for city attorney, city controller, and $200,000 for mayor, correct? As the law is right now, if there's a trigger that allows that additional amount? That, hopefully, yeah.
That's correct.
That's correct. Yeah.
That is correct.
Don't worry. Our City Ethics Commission, feel free to chime in as a team or 2 independent players.
Sorry, Council Member, dealing with lots of different sets of numbers here.
Don't worry. So walk us through, I mean, there's a couple things that I think have been outstanding for a long time, and not all of this gets addressed by a court case, which I, too, like Mr. Rosendahl and others, really was sad to see. I think that it's the second in a series of pretty undemocratic decisions that the U.S. Supreme Court has made, but there isn't really much you can do about it as the court is right now until there are future challenges and maybe different courts. You recommended doing what with that trigger right now?
Yes, we are recommending in this ordinance to suspend those the trigger that provides additional matching funds based on the spending of a non-participating candidate or an independent group, which would mean, by suspend, I mean eliminate for purposes of this election. While we continue to look at
it's temporary
this
for
issue.
this one. We'll look at whether or not we do that long term. Okay.
And I just wanted to clarify, Councilmember, the triggers that you had mentioned, the 50, 100, and 200,000, those are triggers to receive public matching funds. The ordinance that City Attorney's Office is referring to are triggers that would be in effect for the general election. And so those are different triggers. In the primary, it would be a trigger based on the amount a candidate spends that would be equal to half of the spending cap for the primary election. And in the general election, it would be the spending, half of the spending cap, and another amount that's triggered by independent expenditures.
Okay. But you're not recommending changing any provisions to the spending cap itself? Is that correct?
At this point, we are not. However, we recognize that at least 2 other provisions in our current program that the Supreme Court's decision raises a question about the viability of a couple of the other provisions. One includes not the spending limit itself, but the provision that lifts the spending limit based on someone else's speech. We are not recommending suspending those provisions for this special election because, for one thing, they weren't specifically addressed by the Supreme Court decision, and we're continuing to evaluate how viable that they are. We're continuing to discuss it internally and with other folks that are looking at the very same issues across the country.
How does the Ethics Commission feel about, I know California Clean Money campaign, California Common Cause supported offering the full amount without a kind of trigger, that if people qualified, that the additional, so $150,000 for cancel candidates, $100,000 plus an additional $50,000 if the opponent spends over the trigger amount. How does the Ethics Commission feel about that proposal? So it's no longer, because I think that addresses part of the court case, or
yes, providing a pot of money not based on someone else's speech doesn't raise First Amendment issues.
Okay, because I mean that could be one way of dealing with it. There is a larger issue here, which is that we have never seen the donation limitations go up, nor much on the spending caps, unless things are triggered. Now, I don't want to represent the Common Cause and Clean Money are for those things necessarily. I can tell you the practical effect that we all know as council members is you spend more and more time doing fundraising, which is, you want it to be low so people don't have a lot of influence, but you also, I think the public at some point will have to make a decision of how much time they want their elected officials and aspiring elected officials to just be raising money because it takes so long to do that. That aside, because we're not discussing that, at least it would address to some extent because this was just an accelerator, these 3-to-1 or even a proposal of a 4-to-1 matching fund that they've talked about a little bit only gets you that same amount more quickly, but it doesn't actually change the amount that candidates have.
Actually, in the general election, there is an additional pot. That's true for the primary election, but in the general election, there's also an additional pot of money that candidates can get based on independent spending.
And you're not proposing changing that piece? Right?
Yes, both the 3-to-1 match in the primary and the additional funds in the 3-to-1 match in the general.
So the legal issue, and I know you want to chime in a second, the legal issue for you is that we shouldn't have something that when somebody spends additional IE money, we shouldn't trigger giving more money to candidates directly.
No, the Supreme Court made very clear that they viewed that as unconstitutional.
So for the Ethics Commission, if we had more money, which I know is shaky ground because then it's how much money do we want to be giving to races, but we can walk through what the economics of a campaign are today versus 20 years ago when this was brought in real terms, in real dollar terms. What is your take on that in terms of, well, we budgeted this money, what should we do with this money? If it's not out of trigger, should it be there available, period, when a fellow candidate triggers it?
Yeah, Heather Holt for the Ethics Commission. Our commissioners discussed the Arizona case at their meeting last week, and they are very interested in doing some in-depth research and analyzing all of the numbers associated with campaigns, including, as Mr. Park suggested, the contribution limits, even for those who are not publicly funded candidates. So we are in favor of as robust a public funding program as we can have in light of the recent Supreme Court decisions, and we will be providing some in-depth analysis on that, and we are open to raising the amount of money that, for example, might be given to a publicly funded candidate up front to compensate for the loss of these trigger mechanisms, and also to perhaps increasing the contribution limits for everyone.
I'll press my button again because I'm over, but I'd also be just, my parting question is, do you have any thoughts on Mr. Alicorn's, as this comes up, there's some initial good thoughts about it, but I'm sure there's also some things, that we want to weigh. Do you want to have any input on that?
Yeah, we would like to be able to look at the numbers on that. Doubling the amount of money that is given to a publicly funded candidate could have a significant impact on our trust fund, which was not funded this year in light of the city's fiscal crisis. We're anticipating huge elections in 2013 and 2015, and we're estimating a total of $10 million needed for those elections. We also, although we don't even have a special election on the books at this point, we have heard from 6 to 10 individuals who are interested in running in CD15, and if all of them were eligible for matching funds and qualified, that could represent an additional $600,000 to $1 million of money that would be required from the trust fund, which is not to say we shouldn't do it. It's just an alert that this could affect could have a significant effect on the trust fund in light of the upcoming elections in 2013 and 2015. And this might be something that just needs to be addressed at the next budget cycle in terms of whether the fund is replenished.
Okay. All right. I'll press my button again. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Wesson. Why don't we go to Mr. Englander?
Well, texting council, that's right. Thank you. And I think there was a lot of great points brought up just now by Councilman Garcetti as well. And in looking at Mr. Alarcon's motion, I'd like to make a friendly amendment on that. And a lot of the issues that were brought up, and I think the spirit in which the motion is being made, from my take on it anyway, is that we really haven't kept up with CPI. These matching funds, programs, as well as contribution limits have significantly changed. The cost of printing 20 years ago was 25 cents. Now it's 44 cents for postage as opposed to postage back then. So printing has gone up, postage has gone up, television has gone up, radio has gone up, all the advertising and the way to reach voters has gone up significantly. And what we've also seen, I think, in relation to that, and one of the things that hasn't been pointed out is that voter participation has actually gone down a little bit. I think less people are voting because it takes a lot more money to communicate with people. And then campaigns, what they have to do is they have to then target a smaller pool of voters to communicate with because it takes more resources. And so I'd like to see the entire program come back, in fact, to keep up with CPI, to come back with realistic numbers, because it doesn't make sense that we're raising $500 maximum right now. Those were dollars based on figures from 20 years ago. And that's when it was actually passed, not first introduced 20 years ago. And so it's really probably 25 or 30 years old from the initial concept. In addition, there are legal and accounting costs that weren't part of the equation back then to where they are right now. You've got to hire a team of professionals to keep up with all the ethics laws and making sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's. Every election, it seems that we have new ethic laws on the books, which are very good. In fact, this last March, we had Measure H, which then prohibits candidates from raising from city contractors and bidders and sub-vendors. Those all have to be checked and verified as well. And so that takes more time, which costs more money. And so with all of that, I think I'd like to have a real plan come back and amend, if we could, Mr. Alarcon's motion, if he's willing to accept a friendly amendment, to include not only a full revamp of the system financially and what makes sense in today's dollars, but also with office holder accounts as well. Those have not been brought up to speed. I think most that have office holder accounts to communicate with constituents, because we're prohibited, unlike the legislature, we can only communicate with 199 registered voters or constituents at a time per month on a particular issue. It really ties the hands of communication a lot. I've heard already in the last few weeks, and certainly as in the last few years that I've been here, in my previous capacity from residents, that they wanted to hear more about what was going on in their community, what was going on legislatively, what was going on to affect their neighborhoods, and we don't have the ability to communicate with them on a mass basis outside of email. And so I think bringing those CPIs up to speed as one package makes sense. So if you could, and if he'd be willing to accept that as a friendly amendment.
Mr. Englander,
yes.
I just had a conversation with Mr. Alarcon. If you could clarify again for the record, just short
what
version.
The motion would be?
Yes.
It sounds, yeah. To take the motion, bring it back to committee, not just for this election, but for all elections and all future elections, to bring up the CPI in contributions and spending limits, to report back on what the actual dollars should be for both campaigns and office holder accounts.
Mr. Alarcon?
If I can understand, the friendly amendment is to come back with in addition to this action for the special election, that we come back with a report on future elections.
Do it all as one package.
To modify.
And then at that point.
Well, but this one only applies to the special election.
Right. I'd like to apply to all future elections and have it as a holistic approach, but then we've got to have the discussion, as Mr. Parks brought in, is what will that do to...
If your friendly amendment is to ask for a report on future elections, I have no problem with that. But I think we need a lot more information before we make final decisions on future elections in terms of amounts and the ramifications on the budget and everything else.
Which is what I was going to suggest. We're going to, as Mr. Parks suggests, we're going to need that information, and it was brought up as well. The ramifications on what's budgeted for matching funds and what the impacts will be.
So is that your friendly amendment to get a report on future elections?
To get a proposal of cost adjustments on CPI.
But who's making the proposal? I mean, who's making the proposal?
Well, it'd have to come back from the city clerk as a report.
So, Mr. Alarcon,
I think the appropriate way to go on this would be to ask the CLA to come back with a report to recommend changes in accordance with this action.
Would you agree this does not need to be a friendly amendment then? Do you want it to be are you accepting it as a friendly amendment or
well,
not?
if he does it that way, I'll accept it as a friendly amendment. But I think that's the correct way to do it.
Okay, to ask the CLA to come back and report back on a full revamp of all relative to increasing the expenditure limits and revisiting the cost adjustments with CPI and contributions in the context of campaigns.
And add in consultation with the Ethics Commission.
Yes.
So who would like to, do you want to just accept that?
I accept that.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, that is accepted as a friendly amendment. Mr. Koretz will second that friendly amendment by Mr. Englander. Mr. Wesson, you are our next speaker.
Oh, no, I just pushed the button. In fact, I will speak and say that, Mitch, you know, I see where you're going. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I would be very interested when this comes back. Because when you just look at life, 20 years ago, stamps were like 22 cents. Now they're 44, and we could just keep going. You know, you could buy a database for $50 from the county. Now they're $2,500. These are or $4,000, and so I mean these are legitimate increases that I would like to have somebody vet. So it makes absolute great sense to me.
Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Madam President. First, let me say that as I understood this colloquy that just took place, the friendly amendment, which I think is exactly right on about what we need to do to understand more comprehensively how we're going to reform the system to address some of the cost issues and some of the, frankly, the abuse issues that we currently have in it, is very well taken. But as I understood the dialogue, Mr. Alarcon, your motion would, as it applies to this special election, would continue forward with council action today setting those amounts. Is that correct? Okay, so if that's the case, for the very same reasons that we've just discussed about the need for information on this, how the numbers impact it, how the fund would be impacted, I can't support this council taking action today on that special election unless it's referred to committee first, unless we have the opportunity for input from the Ethics Commission and the CLA. I think it would just be inappropriate for this council without a bit of analysis to set a special rule just for one election and change the law for this special election. I think it has to go to committee and it has to have the benefit of those reports. So I'm not going to support that motion for that reason unless it goes to committee first. But second, let me say this point, which I think follows on Mr. Parks' important point and Mr. Englander's and points that were made by others about cost. It's certainly true that without an adjustment of these limitations, candidates are impacted by the increasing costs of campaigns. Much more important is that the public is impacted by it as well, because we have these constraints on what we can accept and what we can report as candidates. What that has created is this horrible destruction of electoral democracy that comes from the independent expenditure campaign and the runaway amounts that are spent entirely outside of any system of accountability or transparency in our. So every step that we've taken to try to reform campaign finance in this city is thwarted by the independent expenditure campaigns. In my campaign, my opponent had almost $2 million spent. Much of that money was spent with vile attacks, with, pseudonym names so that nobody even knows where that money comes from. Now, I tried to address that problem in the state legislature. I'm trying to address it here with a motion to bring accountability, transparency to independent expenditure campaigns. But in my view, the biggest threat is not the wealthy candidate who might try to buy a council seat for themselves. The biggest threat to democracy in this city is the wealthy special interest that might try to buy a council, not by giving contributions to us, but by going into our districts, spending money, attacking us or supporting us in ways that we have no control over whatsoever, and for which we can't even be held accountable through the system of transparency that we have now. So unless we fix that piece, everything else is moot. And in the meantime, I think whatever we can do to try to help with the matching fund program, it's a small step to try to fix that, but it's a very, very limited step unless we can get a handle on independent expenditure campaigns. And so again, I think that's all the more reason that in response to what Mr. Englander suggested, we come back here, look at all of these pieces and how they fit together, and what will be the most effective way that we can try to bring voice back to ordinary people who want to participate in electoral democracy.
Mr. Alarcon.
Council members, leadership is not a thing that necessarily has the benefit of ample deliberation at every occurrence. Leadership is something that requires sometimes judgment calls on the spur of the moment. This is such a time. We cannot ignore an election that is coming up and deadlines that must be met. The fact of the matter is it would be irresponsible of us to allow the replacement election for Councilmember Hahn without correcting the impact of the Supreme Court decision based on previous analysis that this Council has considered, that recognized that the multiplier effect, the accelerated matching funds provision, helped reduce large pots of money coming in from individual candidates out of their personal wealth, to balance the scales for regular folks to be able to run in elections. So I'm asking you to be a leader today. I'm asking you to say, hey, we don't have ample time to do all the changes that all of us think are necessary, and certainly don't have the time to deliberate the specificity of all those diverse opinions. But today we have an opportunity to make a simple change, to say that we can balance the scales of inequity relative to this single election by increasing the matching funds provision and increasing the cap on spending just for this election. At the same time, Mr. Englander introduces a friendly amendment that I think is very helpful by opening up the entire discussion and allowing us to have more ample deliberation and come up with a better decision for broader elections in the future. So with that, I would ask you today, be a leader, vote for this. And by the way, Mr. Krikorian, you would have at least 2 days to consider the ordinance that would be coming back to us should we vote on this item, because the city attorney tells me they would come back with the ordinance on Friday. So with that, I would ask for you to vote aye on this small change for the benefit of democracy.
Mr. Parks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me ask the Ethics Department and also the City Attorney. Mr. Krikorian, I think, has a very valid point about not moving forward without knowing all the facts, and also we don't know what the impact will be on what funds you currently have. And the last thing I'd like to see is you show up at Budget and Finance and say, I need more money. And so how quickly can that evaluation be done, and how does it impact the pending election?
Heather Holt for the Ethics Commission. I'm not sure that we could quickly give you accurate feedback.
Not the larger issue, just the motion here.
For the special election.
That's right.
I'm concerned that the timing is too short in terms of what we would need to do for that special election. At the Ethics Commission, we are very interested all the time in studying the numbers and the laws as precisely as possible, because it's always more complex. As you know, the ethics laws are always more complex than they appear on the surface. So I think it's critically important for us to take the time, which would be months, I think, to appropriately address all of the issues that Mr. Englander rightfully wants to have addressed.
Not that issue. Just the motion for Mr. Alarcon on this movement of dollars. That's all I.
Yes, even though we are always interested in analyzing things as well as possible in advance, I think that this does give us an opportunity to at least try a solution for a single election, and we could incorporate that knowledge, once we're past that election, into our analysis for what we should do on a permanent basis. I don't think that we have the time to give you all of the information that you need. We can give you some data about the matching funds and what we're projecting for the next couple of elections, and how a doubling of the matching funds grant would affect the trust fund. We can probably do that fairly quickly. The bigger issues need to be fleshed out some more.
But also, in the sense of timing, if we'd have to do an ordinance and.
Yes, Renee Stottle, City Attorney's Office. For purposes of this special election, to make changes in our matching funds program, now we just need to do it quickly before, and so that the ordinance is effective before candidates have to decide whether to sign up for matching funds or not. So we have a relatively short time frame here.
What's the timeline in the sense of the ordinance coming forward and getting approved and then becoming as part of the system?
This, we've written, assuming that you actually call a special election, we've written the ordinance as an election ordinance, so it will be immediately effective once it's approved by City Council and published. The time frame that the city clerk has laid out for the first date for candidates to file is August 22nd. So we would need it adopted before then.
Okay. Let me ask what would be the quickest that the ordinance would come before the council? What would be the quickest that you'd have the ordinance before the council?
Friday.
Friday. I don't know if you have time, and on just the motion today, whether you'd have time to give us additional information as to matching funds and budget by Friday?
Yes, we can provide information about what we're projecting for the matching funds trust fund in relationship to this motion by Friday.
All right. I would just ask Mr. Alarcon's motion that we ask for that information with the ordinance coming, and then we can make a decision after we hear what new information may be available.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Mr. Garcetti?
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Those are some of the questions I was going to ask. But just to drill in more precisely, it's a 30-day publishing. If we had it, no? So it goes into effect immediately.
We've written this as an election ordinance only relating to this specific election, so it will go into effect immediately upon publication, no 30 days.
Okay, so that gives us a little bit more time. I was thinking that would, because 30 days from Friday is the 22nd, that's like the first day. So that gives us some time, guys, to be able to, and one gal, that's all that's left, to be able to look at this in more depth. I'd like to get the feedback from the kind of election advocacy community or whatever we call ourselves, from other folks, and be able to weigh on this. I think it's definitely a positive direction. I think there was thinking along these lines, different amounts from different people, but it'll give us some time to do that. So it'd be my recommendation that we might as well draft and look at different things. I assume if you draft something and people are talking about different amounts, those are pretty easy amendments to make. Like, for instance, if it was just going to be, you know, the 25,000 additional instead of 200,000, whatever, we could work out that pretty easily on the fly.
Generally, yes. It just depends.
You never want to be on the record saying things are easy on the fly, so I'll withdraw the question. But the good work of the city attorney could do that in an expeditious manner, no doubt. An elected city attorney, correct? All right. Well, colleagues, why don't we move ahead today? Mr. Alarcon's motion, we'll hear. I think we haven't even had public comment yet still, so I am anxious. I'm glad that it's coming after all of this so we can hear from folks who are following this and get their input on what this is. And the more global discussion, which I'll kind of step back from when it comes. I mean, I think for those of you who want to take that up, I've stated for the record what I think is important, and for all of us to make sure that keeps up with the times, what Mr. Englander and Mr. Wesson and others have said. It certainly, in real terms, has been something different than what the voters passed, that it has gone down in value and less money and more time doing that raising. So the Ethics Commission, I know, is interested in this right now, too. So let's strike while the moment's hot. While it's just a special election that none of us are running for, may be the most appropriate time to do that. And all of this, colleagues, is contingent on, as was pointed out at the table, sequentially, this is just how it was put, our next item, which is whether we're going to set the date, whether we want to call a special election, et cetera. So we don't predispose that yet, and that's what we'll take up next.
Mr. Englander.
I believe my friendly amendment was reframed a little differently than what I anticipated, so this is what I will do, is withdraw it, though, and actually revisit this on Friday when the item comes up again, and reintroduce a proper motion, if you will, at that time, to look at the entire issue and study it and come back as a package. So we'll go ahead and do that if that's okay.
Mr. Alarcon?
I'll modify my motion to include the language relative to the previous friendly amendment.
That has now been withdrawn. Thank you. All right, Mr. Krikorian.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So we're now discussing moving the entire package then to Friday. What we're voting, what's agendized, Mr. Alarcon's motion, and the erstwhile friendly amendment that turned out not to be as friendly as expected.
Mr.
So that's all moving to Friday? Is that?
Mr. Alarcon,
okay.
Mr. Alarcon, yeah, just to clarify, did you, now that he's withdrawn his friendly amendment, do you want it all to come back on Friday, or now this is a separate and apart, two separate actions now, so they're not tied together?
Right.
No, I thought I modified my motion to include that language, and he can modify it again. But the reason I do this is not because of Mr. Englander, but Mr. Parks and I had a previous conversation. It was his intention to ask for a report on the whole matter anyway.
All right. So what you've done is modify anyway.
Yeah.
Based on your conversation with Mr. Parks, so we'll vote on your item as amended.
To ask for a report back on the entire matter.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So that vote will be continued until Friday on that motion as well.
Is that what you intended?
Okay.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
So it turns out leadership can take a deep breath, and leadership can think a little bit, and leadership can vote with some more facts.
Right.
So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr.
To be leaders.
Right, Mr. Alarcon, you pressed your button one more time. Do you want to speak again?
No, I pressed it after.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we're going to move this entire package to Friday, Mr. Clerk. Is that correct? There's no other speakers in the queue. Okay, let's open the roll and vote on what we've done today, and then we'll take it up again on Friday. Open the roll.
If that, Madam President, for clarification, if that's the will of the body, then 17A, as circulated by Councilmember Alarcon, should be voted on.
That's good. All right. Open the roll, please.
On amendment until Friday.
Well, we can go ahead and vote on it and then continue it until Friday.
Why don't we? Should we just amend it?
Why are we?
I think the
Wait a
language.
minute. We've got too many conversations going back and forth. Wait a minute. Hold on a second, Mr. Clerk. Can we vote on this today and then vote to continue it till Friday?
Well, by voting on 17A today, the city attorney would then come back on Friday with that ordinance for consideration.
All right. Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Alarcon?
What did he say?
Say it again, Mr. Clerk.
By voting on 17A today, that would then instruct the city attorney to come back with the ordinance, which
Right.
they've indicated they will bring back on Friday.
All right. That's acceptable. All right. That's fine. All right. Let's open the roll on that.
But wait.
Do you have another question?
They've drafted what's before us. You're saying that the city attorney has already drafted the ordinance as it's being amended by this new motion that I just read for the first time
this
today?
is just asking them to redraft the ordinance and come back on Friday. So we're continuing the matter.
Why are we taking a vote on this prior to doing it on Friday, as we just discussed we were going to do?
If I can clarify, I think what is before us, Mr. Krikorian, is recommendations from the city attorney Mr. Alarcon asked that there be an additional amendment to one portion of it, not the entire thing, that come to us for our consideration of whether we want to take that or any of the portions for a vote on Friday. So it's just the drafting of that, so that will be before us. No, but that's why I said Mr. Alarcon should probably specify, amend the proposed ordinance for consideration.
Yes.
Relating to the primary. And if we add that language, I think we'll have that protection.
The city clerk clarified it. That is the intent, yes.
So this motion is going to be an instruction to the city attorney to draft a proposed ordinance. It is not a motion as it's written now to amend the proposed ordinance.
It's not the final product.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, so we will now vote on Mr. Alarcon's motion with the modified language, and then we will have a second vote so it's clear. Yes.
I think we should take public comment before we vote on
that's
anything.
right. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. Kathy Fang, Arnold Sachs, and John Walsh, and Trent, I think it's Trent Lang. So Kathy Fang is first. Arnold Sachs, if he's still here, is second. John Walsh, and Trent Lang. Yeah, Mr. Parks.
On the direction that we've given earlier, that's also in the direction for the ethics to come back on Friday with the information we requested. That's
Absolutely.
inclusive? Yeah.
Hi, Kathy Fung with California Common Cause. I've tried to listen intently, and I have to admit I'm thoroughly confused as to what we're talking about. I originally came here to speak to the Supreme Court's decision on Arizona free enterprise, which I agree with Councilmember Rosendahl and several others to express that it was a wrongly decided decision, except for Supreme Court Justice Kagan's minority opinion. That said, I think that the city limited scope of removing the provisions, certain trigger provisions in the current matching fund system to address the Supreme Court decision is one that we can reluctantly go along with. I am unclear as to whether or not ordinance language has been drafted and if that's going to be discussed and voted on today, or if that's also tabled for Friday. Okay. So I guess we'll see you again. The second piece that was discussed was the issue of lifting the spending limits. And I will just say that we've had an opportunity to come to you Raising, right, that's what I meant. Raising the spending limits, and we haven't had an opportunity to come to several of the council members individually as well as to the City Council to talk about that. While we are sympathetic to the concern, what we want to do is talk about that as a whole package, because as the City Ethics Commission rightly points out, you tweak one piece and you affect many other pieces, and we want to make sure that this is a program that is robust, that people want to participate in, that if you remove the triggers and you potentially also increase the spending limits, you may have changed the very nature of the matching fund system if we don't also change some other pieces of it. I'll leave it to my colleague Trent Lang to talk about what some of those might be. We look forward to talking to the City Council about this as a whole package and not try to tackle bits and pieces piecemeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Arnold Sachs.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Arnold Sachs. There's much to discuss here. My concern here is the timeline that you talked about with all the different considerations, because without this called for election, who's to say that this item would be appearing before City Council? I mean, when did this decision take place? And so let's start the timeline from there. Why didn't you have discussions about that? And if anything needs an ad hoc committee, maybe this is an item that needs an ad hoc committee. And the triggering mechanism, I'm concerned about lawsuits that would be filed after that. And it was really interesting listening to you discuss how it was the other guy doing this and the other guy doing that and the other guy doing this and the other guy doing that. And somebody even mentioned about a dead mailer, a list of dead people showing up on a Parks campaign supporters mailer. It's really interesting. But again, the timeline started when this decision was made. Why didn't you start the discussions then?
Mr. Walsh?
John Walsh, blogging at Hollywood Highlands, HIGHLANDS.org. Email us your incriminating documents if you work here at City Hall at HollywoodDems@gmail.com. Of course, we are wholeheartedly in favor of these triggers for matching funds. Personally, it will never involve me, because if I ever run for office, I give you permission to send me to animal services and have me euthanized, because I would have to be out of my mind. So you have it right now. I'd like to, and incidentally, I am speaking for McCosker for City Council, one-man committee. I'd like to point out that we believe everything that Mr. Krikorian said. You are 100% right. And as you know, I have given Councilman Krikorian 2 years of immunity from any negative comments about him for one thing. He rid us of 2 politicians, 2 dirty politicians, 2 with 1 shot, Chris Esso and Tamara Galatz, and I will be forever
Mr. Walsh,
indebted
I'm going to have
to you.
to ask you to stay on topic. Thank you.
HollywoodHighlands.org.
Mr. Lang?
Hello, Council. Trent Lang, President of the California Clean Money Campaign. Of course, the city's public financing system is absolutely crucial to the voters' trust of council and candidates and involvement in campaigns. And I think that the passage of Measure H that you all put on the ballot in March 8th with 75% of the vote is an extraordinary mandate for strengthening the system that we have. And as Kathy Fung of Common Cause talked about, we think that is important to do that as a package of elements that address all of these issues at once. We definitely are very sympathetic to the needs to raise the spending cap to catch up with inflation, for instance, and the needs to increase the amounts of matching funds more quickly for candidates. But it has to be part of a package that makes all these pieces work together. So what we would recommend for the special election is a very simple thing to give us time to work on it for the rest of the council, and that is in removing the triggers, instead set the funding amounts the same as they would be as if the items were already triggered. So increase the maximum funds to what it would be is if there was a wealthy candidate in place, $150,000 maximum in the general election, because there's very likely that's going to be the case anyways. And in fact, increase the matching funds rate to the 3-to-1 matching rate as if they were triggered by similar situations, because that's very likely to happen anyways. That's something that's affordable. It's in line with the current law. You can do quickly so that this court decision does not hurt this special election, and then we can take the time to work with you all and work together to come up with a very full and comprehensive system that addresses the spending cap issues and all those other issues that we all agree need to be done. Thank you very much.
That marks the end of our public speakers. Mr. Krikorian, you're still up on the board. Did you? Okay. Mr. Rosendahl, and then Mr. Garcetti.
Just for a point of clarification, I'm not going to speak. What are we going to be voting on? That's all I want to know.
I will have the clerk go over it for everyone one more time right before we vote. Mr. Garcetti wants to speak, and then I'll ask the clerk to do that.
We had a very good and vibrant discussion amongst ourselves. That was the first time we heard from the public. If we're going to be putting some options before us, I would hate them to be ones only that we create around this horseshoe. Any initial thought on what was proposed there in terms of whether or not we would enact the trigger provisions, make it 3-to-1, keep the same money, but do it at the same time? Any gut on that? And should we be drafting that also to be looking at on Friday? Or?
I think from a legal point of view, I would have to look at anything that's different like that. That's a 3-to-1 match. That's different throughout the entire election. That's kind of a different system than what we have right now. And so I'm just uncertain about that right now.
It's parallel. It doesn't necessarily conflict with Mr. Alicon's or other people's motions, because although folks who propose it might not support it if it was a higher amount with it, so I don't want to predispose what their opinions would be, but Ethics Commission have any
Well,
idea?
I think the thought of treating an election as if the trigger provisions had already been triggered is a good concept. The Supreme Court specifically stated in the Arizona case that funding up front does not create the problems or the concerns that they had
It's just that
with the triggers. Yes.
Which is astounding, because it used to be, well, it's one person, one vote. It's usually one speech, one person, but when people have $5 million instead of $500, you seem to have a lot more speech, which doesn't seem to be equal. But we're not back on that. Why don't we ask the CLA to work with the City Attorney and Ethics Commission to examine that, so at least we can discuss it on Friday as well, and to see if there's any legal issues that come up, and then what the policy things could be, so we can consider that too. Okay? If we could just add that to it.
All right, Mr. Clerk, are you ready to outline what we're voting on? Let's do this one issue at a time.
Madam President, before you at this time is the city attorney ordinance that is currently agendized. Also, you have amending motion 17A that was amended to include the phrase "for consideration." So upon approval, if that is the will of the body, that will be considered on Friday as well.
All right, let's open the roll on that. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes, 2 noes.
All right. What else is before us?
Madam President, we still have yet to dispose of item 17, which is the ordinance that's before you. Would you like to continue that matter for consideration on Friday as well?
Yes, let's open the roll for the continuance on item 17. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes, 1 no.
All right, thank you very much. Any other items on this? Mr. Cardenas?
No, ma'am.
For an announcement?
Oh, yes, Mr. Cardenas wants to make a very special announcement before we move on.
Oh, shoot. Symbolic. I knocked over my USC bottle, which is part of this presentation. I'd like Macaria Flores to come up. And many of you know Macaria Flores as one of my policy people in my office. She specializes in environmental issues. She actually traveled around the world with Greg Smith and a whole coalition of people from the city of Los Angeles to do something which is one of her favorite subjects, trash. And I've been very fortunate to have Macaria working with me in my office for about 5 years. She labels herself as a technological nerd, but she's right. And I'm going to miss her dearly for her expertise and her going above and beyond the call of duty and her uniqueness of being able to be noticed and recognized by people so famous as Mitt Romney. Anytime Mitt Romney is in Southern California, somehow she runs into him somewhere and he walks across the room and he says hello to her and he remembers her, even though that's probably no other reason other than the fact that he remembers how special she is and he says hello to her. And that's not a joke, that's true. But in addition to that, I'd just like to say that Macaria is very, very special and we're going to miss her. And she's going to go to the Department of Sanitation. And I'm very, very proud to say that I've had many staff who work for me who get paid very little compared to what they're worth. And finally, she got an offer she couldn't refuse after receiving many, many offers. And I appreciate her willingness to stick around with me as long as she has and to do the wonderful work that she's done on behalf of my office in the city of Los Angeles. And I have another special gift for her, aside from this resolution. If you've noticed, I've had a USC bottle, and I am not a USC fan. So I have found a way to create a duplicate bottle to give to Macaria Flores so that wherever she's at, she can remember the joke that I was willing to play along with her. I was willing to play along with her and carry a bottle that I can't stand and to say, here, this is for you, you deserve it, and better in your hands than mine.
Congratulations. All right, Mr. Clerk, what's our next item?
Madam President, that brings us to item 18, called Special for Councilmember Englander, as well as cards.
We do have cards, so I know, thank you again and congratulations. All right, Mr. Garcetti.
Madam President. Colleagues, why don't we hear from the city clerk? Before us is the proposal for the special election for Council District 15. We do also have public comment, which I'll look forward to hearing after the presentation from the clerk. The proposal that's before us would make sure that we have an election in as timely a fashion as possible, to have the special election for the Council District 15 to be held on November 8th of this year. If a runoff was necessary, that would be on January 17th of 2012. That would allow filing period to move forward, as we discussed a little bit earlier, August 22nd to 27th. And the nominating petition period to run concurrent with that, actually, from August 22nd to September 12th in order to qualify for the ballot. There are cost issues, obviously. Any election costs money, but when folks have talked about doing appointments, which we certainly can, right now we have the chief legislative analyst is the caretaker, holder taker. Avok gets to add another council district to the back of his pocket. But the CLA does not have voting power when the seat is vacant. So as soon as we can fill that seat, the sooner the folks in Council District 15 can have representation on the full council. Again, we do have the legal option, though, of appointing somebody and having that person be here for the interim period or any period up until when the normally scheduled election would be in 2013. Although the city clerk has recommended, should it be our desire to move forward with these dates. So with that, why don't we let our great city clerk say some things about that and what the logistics and costs might be for this election.
Very good. Good morning, members of the City Council, June Lagme, City Clerk's Office. To recap for your information, a week ago Tuesday, the runoff for the 36th Congressional District was concluded. Ms. Janice Hahn was the winner of that race. She tendered her letter of resignation, her resignation effective Monday of this week, and to the best of my knowledge, she was sworn in as Congresswoman yesterday. Okay. Upon the tendering of her resignation, that triggered a vacancy in CD 15. So I am here to present to you your charter options for filling that vacancy. Under Charter Section 409, you have two options. One, you can appoint a long-term person to fill that vacancy. That person would have to fulfill all the requirements of a regular candidate. That is to say, would need to be a registered voter of the district, be a resident of that district 30 days prior to appointment, and would be subject to recall as though they had been elected to office. Your second option under that charter section would be to call a special election. The soonest we would be able to offer you a special election would be a primary on November 8th of this year with a runoff, if necessary, on January 17th, 2012. This would be the earliest date we could hold that election, taking into account reasonable deadlines for prospective candidates to meet the residency requirements, organize their campaigns, adequate time for our office to prepare for the election, and work around the holiday season, which may hinder voter turnout. The cost of such a special election would be approximately $1.5 million. So what you have before you is a list of recommendations which include an ordinance that has been prepared by the city attorney that would set that aforementioned special election on November 8th of this year, which would also instruct identification of a funding source to allocate the necessary funds to the different city clerk funding accounts, and some other ministerial acts that would facilitate your city clerk in administering this election. As for timing, if you choose option A, the appointment, we are not under any great deadline. You can take your time in making that decision who you would choose to officially appoint to that office. If, however, you would like to have a special election and you'd like the primary to be on November 8th, we would need you to adopt that ordinance today, because from that day, all the dates, the subsequent dates are set as far as residency requirement, date of filing, date of accumulating the nominating petition, and all the other dates fall in domino order from today's adoption of the ordinance. The last thing I'd like to mention is the city attorney has prepared the ordinance with a proviso that should the state of California call a special election on November 8th for the purpose of revenue raising and addition of certain taxes, if the state should call that election, this would permit the city of LA to petition to consolidate our primary with that special election, and we could enjoy some moderate cost savings as well as efficiencies, being that voters would not have to face two different elections. So it is, I'm just bringing that to your attention that the ordinance is written in such a way that would give us that flexibility. And that concludes my presentation.
Mr. Rosendahl.
Yes, I know Mr. Weiser had done this, and we've been anecdotally talking here a little bit. What about voting by mail? Is there something we could do to cut the cost down from $1.5 million? Is there a new strategy we could somehow employ on this that would save the city money, save the taxpayers money?
I understand. We did bring before your honorable body last year a proposal generated by our office in conjunct with some voting advocacy groups, being that vote by mail is increasing in strength and seems to be a more popular venue and is a potential cost-saving measure, that we advocated a charter change that would allow us to change the methodology that is currently prescribed in the charter, which is at-poll voting, to turn it into a discretionary all vote by mail combined with neighborhood voting centers instead of precincts. The council at that time turned down that idea, so until such a charter change is brought forward and voted upon by the populace, that would not be possible for this special election.
So you don't see any way to cut the cost back at all from $1.5 million, unless, of course, Jerry Brown puts something on the ballot that is significant. That would that dramatically change the cost?
It would save us. We have tried to get some cost figures from the county. The best I can estimate for you is we would save maybe $300,000 to $400,000 if the special state election ran concurrently with our primary.
Yeah, and when will we know that if they're going to do one?
When do they have to?
Because what's the trigger timetable on all this stuff? It's now July 20th. When would the governor have to get his act together to put something on November 8th?
I don't have that information. I will definitely get it back to you and the entire council as soon as I can.
Yeah, because we could certainly call the governor on this if he's got stuff he wants to play out. Let's save taxpayers money. I mean, it's absurd.
Let me also say that the provision in the ordinance allows us to make the request to be consolidated onto that. They do not have to approve that request. We request it, and they have to consent to allow it.
Oh, sure. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. LeBon?
Madam City Clerk, when was it before us on the issue of vote by mail?
Perhaps you are referring to...
What you just discussed. You said there was a menu of things.
Yes. Last year, our office proposed a charter change so that we could concentrate more on vote by mail and substantially reduce our at-poll precinct expenses, and the council declined that. What the council did at that time was instead to instruct the preparation of an ordinance that would allow mandatory comprehensive vote by mail combined with at-poll voting. That proposal and that ordinance is not before the council today. It is currently pending in committee.
I got it. I think it is maybe an idea for these type of special elections. Although I am a strong believer in local precincts elections, I could see when a special election comes up out of a calendar, not a regular calendar date. I know the city of Burbank, and I don't know if you know the clerk from the city of Burbank or who would do that, and I don't know what percentage the city of Burbank, they do vote by mail. But on a special election, if we knew how much money would a vote by mail be, then would you guess, or do you have that number?
I think it would be a little bit under $1 million.
Yeah, well, why don't you find out truly what it is?
Yes.
And what does $1 million cost? What is $1 million? What's each precinct cost? Have you figured it out, the unit cost?
Unit cost per precinct? Is there such a thing as unit cost per precinct?
I think it would be helpful in the future to find the unit cost of these deals, just as in other things.
Report that back to you.
Yeah, just to get back, and so it gives us a menu, if you will, so we can look at that on the special election. The last special election was held You know what year, Madam City Clerk?
The last special...
No, the last appointed person on council.
I will let you answer that question.
1966, John Ferraro, when Harold Henry, who was a councilman, passed before that. And before that, I don't know. But I just wanted to mention that because John's name, every time I put John's name in, I think he's talking to St. Peter for me. So that's okay. God bless you, John. Thank you.
Mr. Wesson?
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I can remember when I was running for this office, and the seat lay vacant for 6 months. And I think Mr. Weezer, the same thing. No, yeah, it was the same thing in Mr. Weezer's case. So you had 2 council seats that were vacant. And I thank God, because of the relationships that I have with people on the council, I was able to ensure that Council District 10's funds were not raided. I was able to save about $1.5 million that was going to be swept and put in other areas. So the reality is the people in this district will go without a council person for approximately 6 months. So I want to know, where does a VOC live? I think we should appoint a VOC to Council District 15. But no, joking, that was a joke. A VOC, I thought you'd get more support than that, but that didn't occur. We should have the discussion. Let me ask you, is there a way to appoint someone temporarily, or are there no options?
No, the charter requires you to do one or the other. You cannot do both.
I would be curious just to see how the other members of the council felt about that. And I'm not saying I'm fine with the election, but it just struck me, based on the cost, which we really, saving $1.5 million is saving $1.5 million. I don't have anybody in mind, but I'd like to take the temperature of other members to see what is it that we're just afraid to do that, or what are the reasons for not doing that? Because I'm telling you, the people of that district, for 6 months, they're not going to have any voting representation, and my guess is they will lose in that 6 months.
Mr. Englander?
Well, in looking at Mr. Rosenthal's reaction to those comments, I don't know if it's possible to have 2 council members representing 2 different districts, but I would nominate Mr. Rosendahl to fill the vacancy. Yeah, you could take them both. Lobsters. In what Mr. Labange brought up, what Mr. Wesson brought up as well, in looking back at some of the council files, it appears that we did have something in the works, Tom, on VBM, on vote by mail. In fact, this council, on October 29th of 2010, instructed, and I believe it was unanimous, the city attorney to draft an ordinance to allow for use of VBM for special elections to fill vacancies when there's only one thing on the ballot in one district. And with that, I believe this is what I came up with as well, that there was a motion, a verbal motion by Councilman Huizar and seconded by Tony Cardenas on October 29, 2010. There was one prior to that that says the feasibility of conducting vote-by-mail only elections for special elections to fill vacancies when those elections are not citywide and there are no other issues in which to vote on the ballot. That was a motion on October 13, 2009 by then Councilman Greg Smith and Bill Rosendahl. There was another one by then Councilwoman Wendy Gruhl on May 22nd, and Councilman Huizar seconded, asking for steps to require to implement a vote-by-mail election system in the City of Los Angeles in elections with anticipated low turnout or in council district special elections. And I think this is what we're all talking about, is not just the actual cost and saving the money and the idea behind all of these. And if I remember the committee instructions as well, and a lot of the discussion and the reports back from the city clerk and the CLA, were that the cost to do both, the VBM and opening up all the polls, was going to be cost prohibitive. In fact, it would cost significantly more. I don't have the actual numbers in here, but it's in the report.
It's about 20% more.
About 20% more. However, I think the instructions by all the motions were to VBM only, a vote by mail only in those cases, so we'd have more participation, a higher turnout, and the idea of saving money. And I don't believe that was in here, other than the challenges of changing the charter, perhaps, or a 6-month ordinance. To amend the ordinance, it would take perhaps 6 months to amend the ordinance once it's posted. But there wasn't an actual cost as instructed or asked for by this body that I've seen, and I see the motion is now pending in committee now that we've just gotten the draft back recently from the city attorney's office, and it sounds not that we're rushing to this because I don't know how we have a vacancy and we've got to fill it somehow. I think there's been a point made by Mr. LaBonge that it has happened in the past where we filled a vacancy. I don't know if we could ask somebody on the record to commit to not running if we filled it by somebody like the current chief of staff, Don Liu, or anybody else. I'm not throwing that out as a proposal. I'm just mentioning it, that if there was somebody, or seconded by Garcetti, if there was something to do in the interim. We're just talking about millions of dollars here, and I know that this body has instructed on numerous occasions with 3 different motions that I just quickly found and a unanimous vote asking for a VBM only in these kinds of cases to save money, and I don't think we've gotten that information back to make that informed decision yet.
Let me clarify, Mr. Englander. What the council adopted was all vote by mail combined with traditional at-poll voting, and that's the ordinance that is pending in committee, and our report on that is pending in committee. The council voted negatively on all vote by mail without at-poll precinct because that would have entitled a charter change, which the council did not choose to do. Anytime you tamper with or adjust at poll voting, it must have a charter change.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I guess I'm open to whatever. I think we should be looking at some way to save money. Certainly, what Mr. LaBonge pointed out is of interest, that the last time we did an appointment, we appointed somebody as legendary as John Ferraro to the City Council. Ideally, I think we'd find someone that was a capable caretaker to do it, but I'm open to whatever we can think of. But in our present financial state, I think we should at least seriously consider some way to do this that allowed us to save some money on the election.
May I say something for the record? We are asking the amount that we're asking, 1.5, because we anticipate every difficulty, every complication. If the election goes smoothly and we are able, as we always try to do, economize, whatever savings we have will be returned to the general fund, as it has over every election that we run. What we don't spend, we return to the general fund.
Our last estimate for a special election was 1.9, and we did bring it in at about 1.4. That was for CD2.
Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Madam President. Just to follow up on your point, Madam Clerk, about the requirement of amending the charter in order to eliminate polling places and
or
replace
amended in any way.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because isn't it within the discretion of the clerk to, for example, combine precincts in a single polling place if turnout is anticipated to be low?
In certain circumstances where there are a number of voters included with the vote by mail, we can, but it's a very limited number. It's not.
So the reason that I ask that is using the Burbank model, for example, of an all vote by mail system. Burbank still does have live polling places, but they only have about 2 of them for the whole city.
Right.
And that is to accommodate the special needs that somebody might have if they weren't able to, if they didn't get their ballot, if they didn't send it in time, whatever. There are still physical polling stations, but they're very limited in number. Would we not be able to do something like that for a special election where we had one polling place for the whole district, say, and then did the rest by
It would still require a charter change. There's still a cap on the number of voters per precinct.
What's the cap?
Do you know off the top?
It can't be tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Arlene Taylor, City Clerk's Office, Election Division. There is a limit.
You can just look forward so you can speak in the mic. It's okay. It's not rude. It's okay.
There is a limit to the number of established precincts that can be combined into what's called the consolidated precincts. And there's also a limit to the number of voters. We limit the number of voters within city limits to 1,500.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rosendahl?
I guess.
Thank you, Madam President. Could I ask Mr. Avak to come up there for a second? Yeah, and the reason is this, folks. Avak, come on over. Mr. Avak, I call him. In the funds of the 15th district, which is the People's District, there's monies. There's pipeline money and other money. Why don't we take it out of the 15th district's monies? Can we do this? And is there money that could cover this?
I don't know the balances available, and I believe if the council wanted to, they could take that money.
If the council could take that money, we should first find out what kind of monies there are in that fund. Since it's the people's money, it's some kind of a pipeline money or other monies. You know, I love it when my constituents say you have this slush fund or these, other kinds of monies. Well, you know, I don't have any slush fund monies. I don't think anybody does. But if there's pipeline money, and there's other funds within that district that are general tax dollar type monies or from special projects. And if it makes sense, I'd like to know how much money there is, and is it possible, instead of impacting the general fund, we could take those kind of monies. Is that worth exploring? Does the city attorney have a problem with that? Or Mr. Avak, you said the council can take that action?
I believe they can, but we'd have to double check because on some of the funds there are limitations, and with pipeline there were some limitations that they had to be used for street and sidewalks, and I don't recall now if that was suspended for this budget year or not. There were some issues on limitations.
Okay, well, then that would be something to look into and report back. Not the dates of November 8th and January if there's a runoff, but if there's an opportunity without it causing an upheaval in any situation, I'd rather take those kinds of funds if it's possible than general treasury funds at this particular juncture in time. There's also been discussion that if we appointed someone who would ironcladly say they will not run, and that they would take this position, so there's at least where a buck stops, that's obviously something that might have some value. But I really believe in the people participation in democracy, and I worry about if you appoint somebody, they might end up wanting to run, and they get all that visibility and all that, so I have real problems with that notion. But if we could look and think a little bit out of the box, it would be a great thing. And I'm sorry that the motions we did on direct mail and these other things, places like Oregon use it all the time. It's a shame. Since our elections are always off-year elections, we never get anybody voting compared to the rest of the bigger elections. I've always wanted to push it to the on-year election. Instead of getting 10% of the people voting or 15 or 25, we could get 50, 60, 70. And I still believe that they should work out those problems with the county and the state, so when we all go to the polls, we can vote in November of the even years and in the spring of the even years than all the gobbledygook I've heard for 6 years about the county and us and the state. It ends up costing us money. People don't vote. The numbers are just embarrassing for the democracy, the way the turnout is. Some districts, of course, they do vote, but in most districts, there's not much of a turnout. Anyhow, that's my rant.
Mr. Alarcon.
Council members, I think we should just leave things the way they are and move forward as we have historically. I took the 7th Council District when Councilmember Padilla vacated the seat, and the district remained unrepresented for numerous months. The fortunate thing is that the budget is an annual budget, and so the new council member will have the opportunity to use funds that would be accumulated during the time that there is no council member to catch up. And that's what I did when I was elected in the special election, and that's what I would anticipate the next council member would do. So out of respect for your future colleague, I highly recommend that you leave the budget for the 15th Council District representative to come in. Now, the other thing I would add is the voters knew that we would have to have a special election and that there would be a vacancy if Councilmember Hahn were elected to the Congress. They felt she was the best representative, notwithstanding the fact that there would be a vacancy. So in essence, the voters have already decided that, that they would accept the vacancy because they wanted Janice Hahn to represent them in Congress. Thirdly, Janice Hahn has a very competent staff, as has been demonstrated over and over again, and not only by her individual qualities, by the fact that her staff has prepared her to be a tenacious fighter on many, many issues. And all of us who have gone up against her on any occasion know that her staff was right there providing her the information, and I'm sure they will take care of the district in her absence. So I highly recommend we do things as we've done in the past. I don't want to be a part of selecting a candidate in the 15th Council District. I believe the best people to do that are the residents of the 15th Council District. And so I just, for my part, I'd like to stay the course as we have in the past, conduct the special election as recommended by the city clerk, and move forward.
Mr. Labange?
Call for the question.
All right, open the roll on the... Okay, we have one objection from Mr. Garcetti.
My call from my good, fine colleague of the 13th District. Thank you.
You withdrew your call?
I withdrew.
Okay. Mr. Garcetti.
Just real quick, as a point of information, guys, a couple of people were asking whether or not we could make somebody, if they were to be appointed, legally not run. You can't take away those rights, but they can sign a contract with us if they decide to pledge not to. That would be binding. Is kind of the initial take from our city attorney.
Mr. Englander? We got one more. Mr. Englander?
Just quickly, I think, just listening to the arguments, I think, first of all, Councilman Alarcon made a good point about that as well, and that the voters did speak on this. And also, touching any council member's funds, I think, would be a slippery slope and a grave mistake. It's most of those funds that were suggested or looked at actually go back into the district for improvements, for street improvements, for caring for the community. And I don't think that the voters for a second would want those funds spent just on the election. However, I think if I can get a second, perhaps we can ask Congress for an earmark, since the congresswoman of the district now has a specific interest. So maybe we can get a special earmark for the election from Congress.
Okay, good luck with that. Thank you. Mr. Reyes.
Call the question.
Okay. Mr. Reyes has called the question. Open the roll on the call to... All right, why don't you come up first, Mr. Walsh, followed by Mervyn Evans.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org. Yes, we must appoint someone. Tom Labange is wrong. The last person appointed to the city council was Peggy Stevenson when Robert Stevenson died in the early 1970s. I am now going to give you a list of people we believe should be appointed. Pick one. Well, if a widow gets it, how about appointing Judge James Hahn, her brother? Let's appoint him. He can come over here. He can't run for mayor again. If you don't like him, how about Jimmy Kimmel? He's a great person. And I think he would make a great, and he'll promise not to run except for mayor. Also, Mr. McCosker, the firefighter, I think he would make a great, put him on the list, promise not to run. Antonio Villaraigosa's girlfriend from Channel 7, perfect. She has an intimate view of government. Put her on there. Appoint Warren Buratani. He's down there, he's great. Appoint Nate Holden if you want a black person. Appoint Chris Essel if you want a woman. Appoint Ms. Avak if you want a bureaucrat. And last of all, most important of all, if you want to appoint someone to City Council, why not appoint John Walsh? No, not me, John Walsh of America's Most Wanted, because there are so many FBI agents here, he'd feel right at home. John Walsh, America's Most Wanted, appoint him to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mervyn Evans.
I want to thank the council in advance for calling a special election, and I want to urge that we not encourage these candidates to go into bizarre campaigning, flamethrower campaigning, vicious attacks on each other. Let us encourage the candidates to campaign with a sense of concern for the future of Los Angeles, to campaign on the facts and conduct a positive campaign versus another circus and clown act that we saw just recently in that district. This district's important. It has one of the most beautiful aspects of the entire state, the city of San Pedro. It's got an industrial center in Wilmington. It's got a beautiful community in Watts. It's got cultural features that are unique. Any notion of raiding the district's funding, especially the pipe funding, which should be used for pipe safety, we don't want another San Bruno. Let us conduct the election with a sense of pride and well-being for the city of Los Angeles. I look forward in the future of having an excellent person on the city council. I can think of at least one person I think is really good. And let me conclude by saying to you, Mr. President, the outstanding leadership that this council brings is a commitment to the future well-being of our city. Let us not look in a negative way with this opportunity. Let us let the voters decide, not a political insider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that marks the end of public comment on this item. Mr. Clerk, what is the item before us?
Madam President, the item before you is as agendized and as detailed by the city clerk.
All right. We're ready to open the roll on this item. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
All right. Next item.
Madam President, that brings us to the items agendized for closed session.
All right. Mr. Forthwith on that last item. Yes, Mr. Rosendahl?
Yes, Madam President. Those items I had pulled out, I'm satisfied with them all except 29. I'm going to vote no.
All right.
And we don't need to get in closed session. And before we end, I just want to say that since we passed the bike ordinance, we could go forthwith to the mayor. We had 12 votes. Great.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. So, Mr. Clerk, will you please review each item that had previously been scheduled for closed session that we will now vote on in open session?
Very good, Madam President. However, I might remind you that we do now have cards on 27 and 28, if you'd like to hold those, and I can review 29 through 31.
John Walsh on item 27. Is John Walsh still in the chamber? Does not appear that Mr. Walsh is still here. On item 27. And let's see, Arnold Sachs on item 28. Mr. Sachs is still present. If you would come forward.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Arnold Sachs. Very quickly, you have 3 items on this agenda left for the closed session that involve firefighters. So my concern, just out of curiosity, because they involve the firefighters and the city has implemented a new fire safety plan with the redeployment of firefighters to different stations, will the city be tracking to see if injuries are going up, if fires are... I know the fire safety is very important, and I appreciate that, but the city tracking to see if these injuries are related to any changes in the fire personnel being redeployed to the other stations, and what steps would be taken to help to reduce firefighter injuries because of the redeployment. There should be some tracking done by the city, whatever committee is oversight, so that if changes are necessary, there's some kind of history that can be used to implement those changes.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Clerk, why don't you read the items so that we can take a vote en masse?
Very good, Madam President. I'll read the recommendations for items 27 through 31, after which we can take a vote. Relative to item 27, there is a recommendation for settlement in the case entitled Richard Beach versus City of Los Angeles through one stipulated award with an estimated new money payout of $126,816.96 after taking credit for $38,473 that has previously been paid. For item 28, there are recommendations for settlement in the case entitled Donnell Wibble versus City of Los Angeles. Those recommendations are as follows. Claim number 9003-1979-7297 will be dismissed as a duplicate claim, and claim number 9003-1980-6569 will be settled by stipulated award for 80% permanent disability in the amount of $160,177.50 at the weekly rate of $270. For item 29, there are recommendations for settlement in the case entitled Michon Hogan versus City of Los Angeles as follows. Authorize the city attorney to enter into a settlement in the above entitled case through a compromise and release in the total amount of $220,000, after taking credit for $98,587.17 in permanent disability advances. The total new money payout will be $121,412.83, and authorize the city attorney as an alternative authority to enter into a settlement in the above entitled case through a stipulated award for 84% with a total value of $293,391.82, which includes permanent disability indemnity of $125,997.63, plus an estimated life pension of $167,364.19 to be paid at the weekly rate of $92.77 at the conclusion of permanent disability payments. Item 31 is a recommendation for settlement in the case entitled Rodney Felix versus City of Los Angeles through stipulated awards in an aggregate total settlement amount of $342,755.10. After taking credit for permanent disability advances, the aggregate new money payout will be $292,207.25. And finally, item 31, there is a recommendation for settlement in the case entitled Don Donister versus City of Los Angeles through stipulated award for 87% permanent disability in the amount of $190,417.50 at the weekly rate of $270.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I think Mr. Rosendahl has a request to pull 29 out of that bundle and that we vote on that separately. Is that correct, Mr. Rosendahl?
That's correct, Madam President.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we will do that out of respect for you. And Mr. Clerk, all right, so we'll pull 29 out of this bundle and we'll vote on that item separately. Otherwise, let's open the roll on the other items, close the roll, then tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
All right, now let's move forward and vote on item 29. And let's open the roll on 29, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes, 1 no.
All right, thank you very much. What is our next item on the agenda?
Madam President, Council has motions for posting and referral.
All right. Any excuses on the desk?
There is not. The desk is clear.
All right, members, are there any announcements? Any announcements? Mr. Labange?
Tonight for all, if they come to the intersection of Los Feliz and Riverside Drive, I have a community bike ride. You're welcome to come. Bring your helmet. We ride along the Los Angeles River Bikeway through Griffith Park, 6 p.m. tonight, Wednesday.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Mr. Garcetti?
Just want to let folks know August 10th, reminder, is going to be our Revenue Day here in the City Council. We'll be discussing everything for revenue, so get your ideas flowing. We'll have reports from some of the folks from CORE and some of the critical departments, but August 10th we'll be devoting to that. And after Chairwoman of the Ad Hoc Committee completes her deliberations on the 29th, just as a reminder, we'll be having discussion solely on the event center expansion.
Okay, you pressed your button. Any other announcements, members? Any other? All right, would you please rise for adjourning motions? Members, are there any adjourning motions? Everyone, please rise. Any adjourning motions? Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's with great sadness that I learned of the passing of a dear family friend, Frances Schloss. Frances passed away at her home in Beverly Hills, surrounded by her loving family at the age of 75, following a 5-year battle with ovarian cancer. She was born in Oklahoma City, where she grew up and lived a happy childhood. She was the only child of Paul and Bertha Slesnick Byers, owners of a clothing and furniture store. She had a joyful childhood, excelling in school and receiving many honors, graduating high school as a Clausen Award winner in 1953. From Clausen High School, she enrolled in Harvard Radcliffe College in Cambridge, Massachusetts, received her BA degree cum laude in 1957, majoring in American history. After graduating from Harvard, she married fellow Harvard student Stephen Schloss. They later moved to Anaheim, later Whittier, eventually settling down in Beverly Hills in 1968. She was very active in political campaigns. She and her husband were honored to attend the inaugurations of President Lyndon Johnson in 1965, President George Bush in 2005. They were active members of Beth Shalom in Whittier, where she taught religious classes for Jewish teenagers. She was an early leader in the Save Soviet Jewry movement before the Iron Curtain came down. In Beverly Hills, she chaired the History and Civics Department at Rambam High School for 2 years. She enrolled in the PhD program in history at UCLA, but withdrew in order to pursue a career as a stockbroker and financial planner. She began as a stockbroker in the Beverly Hills branch of E.F. Hutton in 1973 and rose to the level of senior vice president, which was unusual in that she was one of the first women to achieve high ranks in the financial planning industry. 18 years ago, she was joined by her son-in-law, John Merritt, in this field. Their business continues as the Schloss Merritt Group at the Beverly Hills branch of Morgan Stanley Smith Barney. She also taught financial planning at the Beverly Hills Adult School for 25 years, wrote a financial column for a chain of local newspapers for many years. She and her beloved husband, Steve, were blessed by 5 children, 15 grandchildren, and a wonderful community of friends and family. As a yearly visitor to Israel, she and her husband, Steve, were honored to have the Schloss Plaza at Jerusalem College of Technology named for them in a moving ceremony this January. Frances is survived by her husband Steve and their 5 children, Hal, Mike, Marion, Bruce, and Judy, and 15 grandchildren. In lieu of flowers, donations can be made to Beth Jacob Congregation, Young Israel of Beverly Hills, Harvard University, or West Coast Friends of Jerusalem College of Technology. And upon receiving the news of someone's death, we speak the following blessing: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Dayan ha'amet. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, the true judge.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Any other adjourning motions? If not, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.